From X-Men to Dimensional Gods. Chapter 41. Night. To be honest, the mutants of this world have it pretty rough. These houses are nothing but crude log cabins, with hardly any modern furniture inside. Even electricity comes from generators, so the lighting is dim. Luckily, the kids don't mind. In the large room, 14 children are bunked together, rows of twin beds, just like a school dormitory. Carl and Raven sit on the edge of a bed. "You're really leaving tomorrow?" Seeing the reluctance in the children's eyes, Raven hesitates, yet she knows they don't belong here. She strokes their cheeks and says, "Kitty will take good care of you." The children exchange glances, the room's mood sinks. Carl gives up any thought of taking them back. Mainly, the failed attempt with the Phoenix Force today has left him disappointed, but he keeps his composure and reassures them. "You're acting like we'll never return. Don't worry, once we've handled our business, we'll come see you." "Really?" The kids brighten instantly. Raven looks uncertain. Of course. As a transmigrator, long accustomed to role-playing, he's honed his acting to perfection. Besides, it isn't a lie. Once his powers evolve enough to cross the multiverse, visiting these kids again will be effortless. The children cheer up at once, and the room grows lively again. Raven watches silently as Carl chats happily with them. Soon, one by one, the kids fall asleep. Carl takes Raven outside, into the forest. The island's night sky is breathtaking, the moon and the Milky Way crystal clear. Carl feels a bit lighter. Raven's expression is complicated. Kitty said the children will be placed with adult mutants nearby, under their care. That's a good plan. Raven stops walking, gazing at the cabins glowing with dim yellow light. After learning about their plight today, she's seen how dire things are for her kind here. Everyone is like an endangered species, waiting only to die. "Carl, is this world's fate sealed?" Carl knows exactly what she's asking. "I don't know." And he truly doesn't, he's only a transmigrator. Elsewhere, knowing past and future might be impressive, but in the Marvel universe with the TVA, plenty of people can do that. Still, he offers a line he's always liked. "Don't worry too much, worrying won't help. But Raven, let me tell you something." Her gaze meets his. "Life will always find a way. Earth has survived several mass extinctions and come back each time. I believe the mutants of this world will too." With those words, Raven's eyes regain their light, though a trace of sorrow remains. Seeing this, Carl smiles and opens his arms. Raven doesn't refuse, she steps gently into his embrace. They hold each other under the night sky. The warmth of Carl's arms comforts her. He gives her the security of a father and the acceptance of a lover. Heat begins to rise within her. Just as she's about to suggest they return indoors for intimacy, a jarring voice cuts in. Startled, Raven pulls back and sees, behind her, a mountain wrapped in aurora-like radiance. "What's happening?" Boom. Before he can finish, a deafening roar shakes the island, the ground trembles. The glowing peak flares as though the whole mountain is ablaze. Carl realizes what's happening. Within the flames he sees a phoenix silhouette. Mutants awaken and stumble from their cabins, staring at the burning peak in shock. Even the children hurry to Carl and Raven's side. "Does anyone know what's going on?" Clarice answers, eyes wide with alarm. "Cerebro. Kitty told me Professor Charles's Cerebro is on that mountain." Everyone senses the danger. Carl shouts without hesitation. "Can you send me there?" "Of course." Clarice hastily opens a portal. As Raven moves to follow, Carl orders. "No, Raven, you and Clarice evacuate every mutant to where we arrived. Now, move." Raven and Clarice grasp the urgency and nod at once. Stepping through the portal, Carl sees a silver-white metal gate emblazoned with an X. With no time for conventional entry, pale spatial magic surges toward the door. The instant they meet, clang. Something snaps, the circular gate shrinks by half. Boom. A colossal energy bursts out, and the half-meter-thick door rockets toward Carl like a cannonball. Fortunately, he's ready. Pale spatial field appears, swallowing the gate. With the door gone, Carl sees inside the cavern. In the silver-white chamber Jean Grey sits upon Cerebro, her body wreathed in phoenix flames, power radiating outward. At the entrance, an aged Magneto and Kitty float helplessly in midair. One looks calm, the other frantic. When they spot Carl, still mobile, their expressions flip. Magneto panics, Kitty shouts in desperate excitement. Mr. Carl, hurry, stop Jean. She's trying to bring the true Phoenix into our world. Though he had already guessed when he saw the scene, Carl was still shocked when Kitty confirmed it. Using spatial magic, he parted the thick, almost liquid torrent of energy and stepped into the cave. Why? What did you do to Miss Jean to make her this crazy? It wasn't us, it was you. Magneto's cold voice rang out, drawing Carl and Kitty's attention. To be precise, ever since Charles lost control a year ago and Jean saw Scott killed by Charles right in front of her, the beast inside her was released, and that's when she got the idea. In that instant Carl thought of one woman, Scarlet Witch Wanda, and exclaimed in disbelief. You're saying Miss Jean Grey wants to use the power of the Phoenix to rewrite reality? Magneto's eyes lit up. So you do know. Then it really is possible. Magneto had considered the notion, but truthfully he had little confidence. He was simply gambling. For the mutants of this world, what more could they lose? Carl frowned, stopped walking, and looked toward the center of the cave where Jean hovered with wings of flame. Theoretically, yes. The Phoenix is strong enough to alter reality, causality, timelines, effortlessly. But what does that have to do with me? Magneto was thoroughly excited. He felt young again. Everything. Before this, Jean knew she could do it, yet she was uneasy. After all, she'd be toying with time and space. After she used telepathy to read Logan's memories, she feared that reversing the past might bring even worse consequences. Now Carl understood. Jean was afraid of returning Logan's already altered future to its original timeline. That timeline was crueler. Sentinel robots had nearly wiped out all mutants and humans. But then you arrived. If Clarice was Jean's first test, your arrival and your news convinced her completely. Changing the timeline might not be so terrible. If you can travel the multiverse to save the mutants of your world, why can't we? Mr. Carl, don't you think that makes sense? Carl saw it clearly now and couldn't argue. Though he loved double standards, as both a mutant and a transmigrator he truly didn't care what this universe's timeline became. You've convinced me. Theoretically, as long as it doesn't affect Raven or me, I have no reason to stop you and Jean. Magneto exhaled in relief and smiled. You're a worthy mutant leader, Carl. But at that moment Kitty couldn't hold back and shouted. No, Eric, Carl, you can't let Jean do this. You have to stop her. Altering reality is impossible. Magneto frowned, clearly annoyed. Kitty, of course it's possible. Our world's future has already been reversed once, you just lost those memories. But Kitty's next answer stunned the two men in the cave. No, Eric, I didn't lose those memories. Magneto's pupils shrank, then he roared in realization. It was Charles. Yes. Pain filled Kitty's face. Professor can't foresee the future, but he knew my ability is crucial and immune to telepathy. So he told me the memory from Logan's mind, just in case. Charles, old friend, you foresaw even this. Magneto was once again awed by his old friend's wisdom, then turned cold. Kitty, since you know, you should support me. Look at what we mutants have become, don't you want to change it? Of course I do, but Jean mustn't be the one to do it. Eric, you don't understand how terrifying the force inside her is, but Professor does. He told me if that power truly descends, instead of remaking our world it will destroy everything it sees. Magneto fell silent, then uttered words that made Kitty shudder. I'd rather see this world destroyed. At that instant Kitty realized Eric had already given up on life. She could only turn to Carl. Carl, only you can stop Jean now. Carl hadn't expected to suddenly become the story's protagonist, but after thinking it over he agreed. He didn't want to die either. If this world ended now, he'd have nowhere to run. Yet, looking at Jean in her rampage, he phrased it tactfully. As Eric said, I'm in no position to judge what you do. But since you can't reach an agreement, why not ask Jean? With that, Carl stepped forward toward the rampaging Jean. For the first time the spatial magic inside him erupted like a flood, while his body entered the hyper-sensory state, his pupils turned pure blue. From sheer spectacle, the spatial magic bursting out of him, turning into threads that wove into the Phoenix power, was no less dazzling than Jean's current fiery display. At that moment time seemed to freeze. Everyone on the island outside could see the flames that had been leaping around the mountain paws as if someone had pressed stop, eerily motionless. The entire island was bathed in soft blue and gold-red light. It looked sacred, beautiful. Like a true deity. Of course, Carl hadn't actually stopped the Phoenix Force, he lacked that power. He had merely stretched the spatial dimension the Phoenix occupied, so no matter how fast it moved, infinite distance made it seem frozen. But Carl knew he couldn't hold it long. Just as the slowly rising Jean said. It's useless, Mr. Carl. I admit the power inside you is wondrous, but before the Phoenix, dimension, space, time, none of it matters. I know. That's why I'm not trying to stop you, I only want to talk. When I'm done, if you haven't changed your mind, I'll leave immediately. Inside the vast cavern, no longer needing Cerebro, Jean had fully blackened into the form of the Dark Phoenix. Her pupils had already turned pitch black. The gold and red Phoenix force flowed through her body. Behind her stretched a pair of gigantic wings wreathed in flame, bringing Carl pressure he had never felt before. What do you want to say? That was good news, at least the Jean of the Dark Phoenix state could still communicate. Under the gaze of Magneto and Kitty, Carl slowly walked a few steps forward, meeting Jean's eyes. Nothing much. I'm just curious, what sort of reality do you want? Without waiting for her answer, Carl kept talking. Put everything back on track, resurrect the dead X-Men, cure the professor, change the fate of the mutants. Honestly, before I came to your world, if I were you and had your power, I'd do the same. But now, though I still might, I'd probably think twice. At this, all three looked puzzled, unsure what Carl was driving at. The reason my mind changed is that the first night Raven and I arrived, we found photos of Charles and Logan online. Seriously, I'd never seen them so old. I guess you saw it too through Raven's memories. Our Charles isn't even 30, full of vigor, and Logan, though over 100, could pass for 30. Yet seeing them so aged made me realize something. Under their stares, Carl delivered the key line. Don't you feel that your world's Charles and Logan are simply too tired? Those words sent a jolt through Jean, Magneto, and Kitty. Logan aside, he's lived nearly 2 centuries. Jean, you've got telepathy, you know better than I what those 200 years have done to him. For him, immortality isn't a blessing, it's a curse. At long last he can be free of it, do you really want him to stay in pain? Boom. Energy in the wings behind Jean rumbled, her once black pupils regained some light. And Charles. Here Carl looked at the aged Magneto. He's like you, Mr. Eric, cursed. The curse is called mutant. A fate with no future, no end, an eternal grind between mutant and human strife. What's worse, you've done so much, yet nothing ever changes. Magneto's gaze turned distant, as if returning to the days when he and Charles were young. Kitty's eyes softened as well. So, after learning this, I dropped the idea of seeking out Charles and Logan. I didn't want to disturb them. Then why did you change your mind again? Jean suddenly asked. Simple. I want to give them a farewell worthy of X-Men, warriors, heroes, so they can leave this world in peace. The darkness in Jean's pupils slowly receded. Though she lacked the power to see the future now, by witnessing so many multiverse events in Raven's memories she understood. What about the mutants, then? Magneto asked. Carl's answer was simple. Raven asked me the same. My reply, life will find its own way. You, Charles, and Logan have done enough for the mutants. From here, leave it to youngsters like Kitty, trust them. Magneto looked at Kitty, her gaze turned utterly gentle, tears in her eyes as she said. Eric, leave it to me. Jean and I will protect everyone in your and the professor's place. At that moment Magneto's sight seemed to pierce time. Every memory of what he and Charles had done for mutants surged forth. After an unknown span he exhaled, swayed, reached up, and removed the helmet from his head. Yes, I'm old. With that, he placed the helmet, amid Kitty's tear-streaked astonishment, into her hands. Take it. It's all I have left to give. Kitty's eyes brimmed, she nodded firmly. Watching her accept the helmet, Eric looked even older, lacking strength to stand. He sat wearily against the rock wall and glanced at Jean, now fully returned to normal. Come here, Jean. Jean walked over slowly and knelt before Magneto. Gently he stroked her head. Jean, you've grown so old. I still picture the little girl Charles and I first met. At that instant the Phoenix force in the air dispersed, returning to Jean's body. The crisis ended, though it no longer seemed to matter. The future is yours. I can finally rest. With those words Eric leaned alone against the wall, an ordinary old man, his eyes slowly closing. His breath slowed, and slowed, until Jean's tears streamed forth. She caressed the elder who had devoted his life to mutants, the fire in her gaze igniting once more. United States, Oklahoma. Carl's arrival had still altered this world's course. Mystique's appearance, for example, blunted Dr. Reese's interest in X-23. And Pierce's modifications lessened the Raiders' urgency in hunting Logan. Finally, to track Raven, Logan took Caliban with him this time. Thus Logan, X-23, Charles, and Caliban set off on the road. As for Ms. Jean Grey, sadly she had died before Carl and Raven ever hit the news. Yet that didn't mean smooth travels, for, aside from outside troubles, an Alzheimer-stricken Professor X, whose power might erupt at any moment, became the most unstable factor of the trip. Unfortunately, while passing a casino in Oklahoma, the professor lost control. Luckily, after leaving, they met a family on the road. With Charles calming their runaway horses via telepathy and Logan helping push the car, the family invited them to stay. Though Logan wanted no delay, Charles accepted on his own initiative. So for once they enjoyed a hearty dinner and a place to sleep. It was the soundest rest they'd had since setting out. Under dim lamplight Charles lay in bed, beside him was the little wolf girl, Laura. Laura slept soundly, yet Charles could find no sleep. Because earlier that day, when his power went wild, the lost memories resurfaced, he remembered everything. Everything that had happened 1 year ago. Scott, Raven, Hank, Aurora, Anna Marie, Bobby, Ellen. The recollection tormented him, yet he dared not show it, fearing to burden Logan. Just then a voice spoke beside his ear. Charles, how long do you plan to lie there? Eric. On the other side. After helping the host family deal with some gang trouble, Logan returned to the car. The house had limited rooms, so only Charles and Laura could sleep inside, while he and Caliban had to sleep in the car. Fortunately, Logan's Rolls-Royce had plenty of space. When he got in, Caliban was already asleep, exhausted. Logan, panting heavily, stared at himself in the rear-view mirror. He had grown too old. Merely scaring those gangsters had left him utterly drained. Just as he was dozing off, a voice suddenly rang beside his ear, jolting him awake. His steel claws shot out. Logan. But when he turned toward the voice, he froze. In the passenger seat sat Jean, still graceful in a red dress. The familiar sight felt like 20 years ago, the first time he'd met her. Back then she'd been as beautiful as she was now. Logan's gaze turned dreamy, then he frowned hard and shook his head. Was he dreaming? Jean. Jean didn't answer. Eyes full of sorrow, she caressed his blood-stained chest and the rusted claws that could no longer fully extend. The tender touch told Logan this was no dream, his eyes brimmed with longing. But why? At that moment, Jean spoke slowly. I've come for the professor. Professor. Following her gaze, Logan looked outside and saw an unbelievable sight. Two familiar figures stood at the doorway. Professor, Eric. And I'm giving you a gift, Logan. Jean pressed her palm to his chest. In an instant, searing fire poured into him, burning away pain and wounds. Fierce flames blurred everything, leaving only a voice. Remember, Logan, when the first sunlight strikes the earth 5 days from now, all this will end. Jean. 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 Logan kept calling until a voice woke him. Logan. Logan. He snapped awake. Nothing had changed, only Caliban stared wide-eyed. So it had been a dream. Then Caliban's incredulous voice rang in his ear. Logan, you. Logan growled impatiently. What about me? Go to sleep. We hit the road tomorrow. No, Logan, look. Caliban grabbed him, pointing at the rear-view mirror. Logan looked, and froze solid. Though still aged, every wound had vanished, his muscles thrummed with power. Snicked. As his claws shot out, all rust was gone, they gleamed white and deadly. Understanding dawned. He leapt from the car, instantly feeling decades younger. As if 20 years had rolled back. When he reached Charles's room, he found Laura awake, holding Charles's hand beside the lifeless professor, speaking for the first time. He's gone. It seemed long, yet for Jean with the Phoenix Force it was mere breaths. Carl, seeing the danger pass, exhaled and reabsorbed the spatial magic drifting around. Suddenly Jean spoke. Mr. Carl, please bring Clarice and Raven here. Okay. Puzzled, Carl still obeyed and opened a portal. On the other side, Raven and Clarice were frantically evacuating mutants. Carl's arrival let them finally breathe. The two stepped through Carl's portal into the cave. Raven saw Magneto half slumped against the wall, helmet gone, eyes closed as if asleep. Her pupils shrank, unease flashed, she already knew. Though not the Eric she knew, grief still washed over her. Carl gently pulled her into an embrace. Jean handed Magneto to Kitty, rose, and said to the stunned Clarice. Sorry, Clarice, I lied. I could have sent you home long ago. Clarice startled, resentment rising, but Jean's honesty, Magneto's death, and the sorrowful mood calmed her. She spoke softly. Still, you and Kitty saved my life. Thank you. Jean turned to Raven. Raven, though you're not the Mystique I knew, I'm glad to meet you. You're lucky. Her gaze fell on Carl. May you carry that luck to the mutants of your world. The farewell tone puzzled everyone, yet Raven nodded, gripping Carl's hand. I will. Jean nodded, then stunned them all. She is leaving. Only Carl and Kitty understood who she was. Next, she will take the professor and Eric's souls where they belong, where they can finally rest. As for you, Kitty, Clarice, Raven, and Mr. Carl, this is both a chance and a gift. I don't know if she can give you what you want, but are you willing to try? Carl, baffled, still nodded after a moment. Jean nodded in return. Give me your hands. She slowly extended both of hers. The five joined hands. Vast Phoenix force surged from Jean, flowing through them. The immense power felt ready to burst their bodies, even Carl's. Yet within seconds it left them, coalescing into a giant gold-crimson phoenix that shot out of Earth. TVA, full name, Time Variance Authority. Ever since Kong the Conqueror died and Loki became the god of stories, reshaping the multiverse. TVA finally enjoyed a period of calm, but it didn't last long. Because new trouble arrived. Every story begins with the hardest part. These timelines resurrected by Loki had too many troublesome characters. Like that guy called Deadpool, freely jumping through and wrecking timelines. Or that symbiote called Venom, its spawn already affecting other timelines. Finally, there's the one and only time variant named Carl. Not only has the agent sent to catch him vanished, he's begun interfering with other timelines. But honestly, for the present TVA, these weren't the real big trouble. The real big trouble was the ancient gods awakened alongside these resurrected timelines, like the symbiote god Null, source of all symbiotes. And the Phoenix. Woo. Suddenly, a sharp alarm rang through TVA. Every busy clerk looked up worriedly, only to see squads of armed TVA agents heading for the main control room. What's happening? The ordinary clerks glanced around, clueless. Right then, a boom shook TVA, the whole place trembling violently. Everyone stared at one another. Though none knew exactly what happened, one thing was certain: only ancient, mighty beings could make the TVA, outside all timelines, quake like this. After who knew how long, the shaking finally stopped. Is it over? Inside a TVA control room. When the shaking ceased, black female agent B-15, promoted for meritorious service, led a team inside. The moment they entered, they saw two men standing before countless screens. One was Mobius M. Mobius, like B-15, he'd risen to high office through meritorious service. The other was Mr. Paradox, a middle manager who actually did the work. Both stared fixedly at the screens. Displayed was Carl's universe, Earth 17315, Logan, where a giant phoenix left Earth and soared into the cosmos. Only the feed flickered like a bad signal. Is it over? B-15 asked the key question. Time Miss answered out of thin air. It's gone, the Phoenix Force has left. Earth 17315 is safe. Though her creator Kong was dead, her unique abilities kept her at TVA. B-15 breathed easy. Though new to high office, she knew some universes couldn't endure the full descent of ancient gods like the Phoenix. With the crisis over, B-15 glared at Mr. Paradox. Mr. Paradox, if not for the Phoenix, how long were you going to hide this one-time variant? The somewhat comical Mr. Paradox flinched, then spoke righteously. Hide. Never, just didn't want to bother you desk jockeys with something I thought I could handle. B-15 wasn't moved. Mr. Paradox, I started where you are. And this is no small matter, you lost the time controller. Never saw that coming. B-15 kept arguing. Who knew this one-time variant could resist the time controller? Otherwise he'd already be caught. Enough. Seeing the two about to quarrel, Mobius, who'd been watching the Phoenix, finally turned, thumped the table, and snapped. Now's not the time to argue. We need to decide what to do with this time variant. He's gained Phoenix power and become even more troublesome. The room fell silent. B-15 asked, puzzled. Why? We're not policing these cross-timers anymore, right? Mobius looked grim, thumbed his time controller, and the screens changed. Countless golden timelines appeared, two of them turning blue. What's this? Time Miss answered again. We don't know, but this time variant seems to have a unique power to affect timelines. These two have slipped our control, that's why the screens flicker. Good thing we caught it early. B-15 was stunned. So, what do we do? No one answered. They looked at each other until Mobius made the final call. After Sylvie, we put a backdoor in every time controller, exile him to the land of nihility. Land of nihility. Did I hear that right? B-15 was dazed, unsure if Paradox had misspoken, said, land of nihility, instead of, land of the lost. Mr. Paradox looked equally puzzled. Time Miss explained. The multiverse Mr. Loki resurrected was built on the single sacred timeline Mr. Kong once trimmed. But not all timelines were included. From the beginning, Kong discarded some dangerous and irrelevant timelines. He didn't know what to do with them, until he discovered a mysterious dimension, the land of nihility. How mysterious. That dimension holds countless chaotic timelines, zombies, Godzilla, Superman, Ultraman, plus Universal, Warner, Sony. What? Doesn't matter. Mobius answered. What matters is the land of nihility was forgotten by TVA. After Loki remade the timelines, some irrelevant ones, like Star Wars, Planet of the Apes, Alien vs. Predator, were tossed in because we had no time. B-14 understood. So you rebooted the land of nihility and dumped those timelines there. Mr. Paradox muttered. Disney rules the world. Mobius said nothing. That's why he didn't want to make a big deal about Carl. He suspected it was connected to rebooting the land of nihility. Mr. Paradox's gaze turned meaningful. B-15 knew further talk was useless. Then where are you prepared to exile this one-time variant? Earth 195041, Constantine. Dawn, when the sky was just beginning to lighten. Everyone gathered in the cave that housed Cerebro, their eyes on Clarice as she struggled to open a portal. Unlike every previous attempt, when she had screamed herself hoarse as though the effort would drain every ounce of her strength, this time she looked completely at ease. The reason was simple. The phoenix fire blazing in her eyes told the whole story. At that moment, everyone present understood what Jean meant by a gift. When the phoenix force leaves its host, it leaves a sliver of power behind, called a phoenix fragment, as a final present. Last night, Jean had used the phoenix force to link everyone in a loophole-like way, giving each of the 5 people present a fragment of that power. It was only a tiny portion, tiny for the Phoenix, Marvel's supreme force, but for ordinary humans or mutants, it was tremendous. The energy easily boosted the mutant abilities of the other 3, apart from Jean and Carl. And it strengthened their bodies as well. Opening portals became effortless for Clarice. As a dimension hopper, she could now sense the universe she'd come from, and she was trying to see whether she could open a portal back to her own world. Kitty Pryde, meanwhile, could now let others briefly share her phasing power with a touch, and she could phase through air itself, swimming through the sky as if it were water. Raven's physique had been unbelievably enhanced, turning her from an ordinary person into a super soldier. She'd also gained powerful self-healing, not as monstrous as Wolverine's, but enough that conventional weapons could no longer kill her. But the excitement was everyone else's, it had nothing to do with Carl. Outside the cave, at the cliff's edge facing the sea. Carl stood in the sea breeze, a pale blue sphere of spatial magic floating between his hands. Inside it, a small gold and crimson phoenix danced. Carl had used spatial magic to trap the phoenix fragment. Last night, the fragment inside him realized it couldn't fuse with his body. His spatial magic rejected it, so it tried to leave. Carl wasn't about to let that power escape. He built a vast isolated space and locked the energy inside. Looks like it failed after all. That pale blue power in you is peculiar. It feels nothing like the phoenix, far weaker than even this tiny fragment, but the phoenix can't do a thing to it. Maybe that's why you exist. Still, proud as the phoenix is, she can't accept it, so you can't use any of her strength. The speaker was Jean, walking out of the cave. No one in this world understood the phoenix force better than Jean Grey, now fully merged with her second personality. Is there really no way? Carl was unwilling to accept it. Jean's gaze turned thoughtful. Not necessarily. Every will inside a phoenix fragment is merely a projection of the one true phoenix. If you can find a place her consciousness can't reach, the power becomes ownerless. Understanding flashed in Carl's eyes. But it's nearly impossible. As one of the primal energies that shape the multiverse, the Phoenix Force has no blind spots. Then why tell me this? Because you're special. Jean's gaze was profound. Whether it's the power in you that even the Phoenix can't tame, or your uniqueness, I feel that if anyone can do it, it's you. For once, Carl's heart was far from calm. He looked at Jean, her earlier weariness gone, once again the charming femme fatale, then out to the distant sea, and said slowly. You know, I used to be an incredibly proud man. I can feel it. The last person who encouraged me like that was my foster mother. Back then I never thought I needed anyone's approval. No one in the world had the right to judge me, my foster parents only half counted. But after they died, I realized that no matter how strong you are, you can't escape the herd instinct of a social animal. Maybe that sounds weak, but I don't hate the feeling, so thank you. Jean's eyes brightened. She sensed in Carl the charisma Professor had in his youth, and said meaningfully. No need to thank me, we're friends, aren't we? Carl caught her meaning. Yes, we're friends. Seeing him agree, Jean continued. What are your plans next? Back to business, Carl's tone lightened. Nothing much. You've done what I wanted. As your friend, it's my turn to help you. After last night's energy spike, the island's definitely been spotted. I only have 4 days, but if we use them well, we can accomplish plenty. What do you intend to do? Step 1. The Akali Institute and Dr. Reese, it's time they paid for everything they've done to mutants. Jean frowned slightly. You want to start a war, but with only the mutants we have now, we can't beat humanity. Carl understood her concern. You're right, if we relied only on the mutants currently on the island, striking back at humanity would be a bad move. But don't forget, we have reinforcements. Reinforcements. Jean blinked, then caught on, eyes brightening. You mean Clarice? Exactly. Carl laid out his idea. It's a perfect chance. The mutants of this world are in trouble, and so are the mutants in Clarice's world. For both worlds, cooperation is a good option, and we have the advantages and conditions to make it happen. Old History, 2014. Both mutants and humans faced extermination, hunted by Sentinel robots. Led by Professor X and Magneto, the two found Wolverine Logan and, using Kitty Pryde's power, sent Logan into the past to rewrite the future. The X-Men and Logan believed they had succeeded. They had changed the past and future and stopped the Sentinels from ever appearing. And indeed they had, yet no one noticed that their so-called future reversal had split their original timeline into 2 new ones. One of them is the Logan timeline Carl now inhabits. Logan's success in altering the past meant Professor and the X-Men survived, including Jean, the Phoenix. The original timeline became Earth 2,017,102, the world of the gifted from which Clarice came. In this timeline, because Logan changed the past and reversed the future. On the day in 2014 when mutants awoke, the elder X-Men had vanished, along with several members of the Brotherhood of Mutants. Without the X-Men or Brotherhood to protect them, the world's mutants were instantly surrounded and slaughtered by humans. Although the reversal erased the dreaded Sentinels, a Sentinel Services Agency arose to target mutants. The abrupt disappearance of the X-Men left young mutants unprepared for humanity's onslaught. Thus, in only 3 years, the world's mutants sank into a new despair. Against Sentinel Services and government forces, they had almost no power to resist. Yet 3 years had also hardened these young mutants. Despite internal rifts and factions, they slowly united against a common enemy. Their new leader was one of Magneto's daughters, codenamed Polaris, Lorna. Around Lorna gathered young mutants of immense power. Among them, her husband Eclipse, who absorbs and manipulates photons. Her friend Thunderbird, possessor of super strength, speed and enhanced senses, once leader of the mutant underground. The Stepford Cuckoos, genetic clones of White Queen Emma Frost, each wielding potent telepathy. The Strucker siblings, currently Lorna's strongest warriors. Sister Andy can disintegrate anything, brother Lauren can tear anything apart. One Eye, ex-leader of the Morlocks, whose sealed eye releases energy equal to any attack he has received. Recently, united and at the cost of the Strucker siblings' father Reed, they defeated Reva Page, leader of the Inner Circle who sought to incite war and found a mutant nation, winning a brief victory. Though conflict between mutants and humans would continue, everyone finally enjoyed a moment of peace. Night. Inside the vanished mutant underground's abandoned garage, the group gathered. News had come of a nearby camp where a newly awakened mutant needed help. Yet faces were gloomy, the underground that once shielded them was gone. Mrs. Strucker, now fighting to protect mutants, encouraged them. "It's all right, Max. We can start over." At her words all eyes turned to Lorna. Among the remaining mutants she was the undisputed leader. Suddenly Thunderbird, silent until now, sprang up and rushed outside. In the darkness amid rows of used cars, a pink portal bloomed before everyone's eyes. Clarice, who had fallen to Sentinel Services agents through a portal, stepped out. Thunderbird, whose bond with her ran deeper than comradeship, rejoiced. Before he could speak, Clarice blurted, "You have to come with me, the world needs your help." Inside the Cerebro cavern. Another day had passed, only 3 remained until Carl's departure. Clarice now had the power to return to her world and summon aid, an unparalleled boon, yet when Carl, Jean Grey, Raven and Kitty gathered again, the mood was off. "Do you think Clarice can persuade the mutants of her world to help us?" Kitty, aware of Carl's plan, asked dejectedly. Carl and Raven were puzzled. Yesterday she had been excited. Noting her change, Kitty explained. "I told everyone, but they're done fighting. They're exhausted." She glanced apologetically at Jean, clutching the helmet Eric had left her. "Sorry, I can't be like Eric. If he were here he might rally them, I can't." Carl and Raven finally understood. Unlike the gifted timeline where only the X-Men vanished, this world had seen no new mutants for 25 years, they saw only extinction and waited listlessly for the end. "Did you tell them about Clarice?" Raven asked. Kitty nodded grimly. The despair of this world shook Raven anew. She looked to Carl. He did not disappoint her. "How many will fight?" "Only 13, former Brotherhood members still moved by Eric's spirit. Then only one option remains. Everything hinges on one person, only he might rekindle every mutant's will to fight." Everyone present knew whom he meant. Logan. Wolverine. Carl then recalled something. Do the X-Men's old uniforms still exist? North Dakota. The 39th state on the western border of the United States, bordering Canada. After a full day of travel yesterday, Logan finally brought Laura and Caliban here. Now only the final step remains before they reach their destination. In the driver's seat, Caliban, wrapped from head to toe with only his eyes showing, was driving while staring in shock at the passenger seat, where Logan had regained a hint of youth. In the back, the little lowly Laura's eyes were also sparkling. Honestly, Logan himself was puzzled. Looking at the steel claws protruding between his knuckles, Jean's words from 2 nights ago still echoed in his mind. "Remember, Logan, when the first ray of sunlight strikes the Earth 5 days from now, all of this will end. Counting today, only 3 days remain." He knows, of course, that he hasn't truly regained his youth. He can feel his life force burning away rapidly. This brief surge of power is paid for with his own life. He isn't afraid of death, yet he's keenly aware something has happened among the mutants. But he doesn't know what. Is it related to these children, or to those 2 newly emerged mutants? He also realizes this child named Laura is connected to him, and the journey so far has been suspiciously smooth, no obstacles at all, which unsettles him even more. Suddenly, boom, an explosion rang out and the car lurched to a crooked stop. Don't panic, it isn't an ambush. After the long trip, Logan's battered second-hand Rolls-Royce has finally given up the ghost. Logan climbed out, popped the hood, and found the car beyond repair. Logan spat the curse. Truth be told, since aging, he hadn't cursed this freely in ages. That unclogged, full-body feeling gave him the first taste of youthful joy, as if he were back 20-plus years in the X-Men world, when hope still filled everything. But when he looked up at the ancient Caliban and Laura gazing at him expectantly, he crashed back into this hopeless reality. Caliban, still wrapped up, stepped out, glanced at the steaming engine and Logan's grim face, and asked, "Now what?" Logan almost swore again, but seeing Laura climb out as well, he held it in. "Grab your gear and keep walking." So the three of them packed up and continued along the road. Most of North Dakota is endless prairie. All they saw was wilderness and gravel. Who knew when they'd spot people again? Laura stayed close to Logan's side. Lost in thought, Logan felt something grab his finger. He looked down. Laura's tiny hand wrapped around it. Irritated, he almost pulled away, yet realizing his time was short, for the first time he showed an unprecedented gentleness. Thus, as if reaching a silent truce, one large and one small hand stayed clasped together. Behind them, Caliban, though the sunlight pained him, still smiled at the sight. After 3 hours of walking they finally spotted a small town. Logan pulled out a wad of cash he'd saved for ages. The money had been meant for Charles, but Charles was gone now. Just as he handed the cash to the dealer to buy a second-hand car and move on. The dealers pocketed the money, surrounded the trio, and refused to deliver the car, snarling threats instead. "I know you, mutant, Wolverine. Freak, get out of here or I'll call the cops to haul you in. Why haven't you things gone extinct yet?" Unable to bear it, Laura extended her claws to wipe them out, but Logan held her back. His eyelids twitched, the steel claws at his fingertips itching to spring forth, yet in the end he restrained himself. "Let's go." This only excited the dealers. They burst into laughter. "Beat it. Monsters. You're not welcome here." With no money and no car, the three resumed their slow march out of town. Caliban's eyes flickered as if to speak, yet Laura remained calm, her small hand still holding Logan's. Soon they left the town behind. Then a horn blared behind them, clearly aimed at them. They turned and paled. The honking vehicle was the very black SUV Logan had chosen earlier. His face darkened, assuming the dealers had come to harass them again. But as the car coasted beside them and the window rolled down, Logan's expression turned oddly complex. On the sun-scorched road, a black sedan pulled to the shoulder. Carl and Logan stood by the front. Laura and Caliban, invited, sat inside, joining Raven in the passenger seat, all watching intently. Neither side spoke. Carl fetched a bottle of liquor from the trunk and handed it to Logan. Logan glanced at it, took it unceremoniously, rinsed his mouth, then gulped it down. In moments the whole bottle was empty. "Got more?" "Of course." Carl produced another bottle. Logan drained that one too, then looked at the blue-skinned Raven and asked, "So who are you people?" "I buried her corpse with my own hands." Carl and Raven exchanged glances before Carl explained. "My name is Carl Lance." As for Raven, no introduction needed. "We're here because we're not from your world." Logan frowned. Caliban's eyes bulged. Laura looked lost. "It's complicated. Think of it as another universe where mutants have only just appeared and Charles is just 30. Logan stared in disbelief. "So what do you want with me?" "We need you, this world needs you. Jean and I are ready to wage war on Akali research and make them pay for everything, and save this world's mutants. But the rest have lost hope. Only you, Logan, can rekindle their will to fight." Logan instinctively tried to refuse, but Carl didn't give him the chance. Hook him first, persuade him later. "I never liked meddling. This isn't our world. But Jean gave Raven and me a gift we couldn't refuse, and we're all mutants, still, no pressure." With that, Carl produced the car keys. "This car is yours, really. If you refuse, at least drive it away. But I think you should come, whether for Laura, or for Jean." On Genosha Island, a funeral was underway. In normal circumstances, such a moment would call for protecting the morale of every mutant, yet for Professor X and Magneto, two old men who had devoted their lives to mutantkind, Jean still resolved to hold a grand funeral. As the two were lowered into the earth, Kitty Pryde, standing to the side and silently watching the names etched into the headstones, understood why Jean had chosen this moment. they couldn't be sure they would ever get another chance to honor the two. Kitty looked around. Every mutant present wore the same numb, lost expression. Under the bright sun, the island felt lifeless. Fewer than half the island's mutants had even come. Those who stayed away had already surrendered all hope, huddling in their homes to wait for death. One by one, the mourners laid flowers on the graves. Last came the 14 children newly arrived on the island. As the future of mutantkind, they offered their blessings, praying the two elders would find a world free of pain. At that moment, pink light shimmered in the air. A portal appeared before everyone's eyes. Clarice had returned. Behind her followed the mutants from their own world. Polaris, Eclipse, Thunderbird, the Stepford Cuckoos, the Strucker siblings, Blink, and the human Mrs. Strucker. Although the young mutants from the gifted world had heard through Clarice what had happened here, actually stepping through the portal and seeing the ragged, broken mutants before them, their eyes still filled with shock. Compared with this despair, their own world no longer seemed hopeless. Then the bewildered, uneasy mutant leader, Polaris, Lorna, saw, at the center of the crowd, the name carved into the headstone, Eric Lenscher. Lorna's vision blurred with tears, her body trembling. In her world she and her father had never been close, yet seeing his grave still brought a stab of pain. Beyond the two fresh graves stretched row after row of familiar X-Men names. Scott, Raven, Hank, Aurora, Anna Marie, Bobby, Alan. Are you all right, Lorna? Her boyfriend Eclipse felt her grief and steadied her at once. No. Max. Lorna refused his support, tears in her eyes, and slowly made her way through the crowd to her father's grave. There she also saw the two mutant women she idolized. Ms. Jean, Ms. Kitty. Jean and Kitty nodded. It was Kitty's first time meeting Eric's daughter from another world. Jean had already met her. I've seen everything you've done in your world. Your father was a hero to mutantkind, you've lived up to his blood. Thank you. Lay a flower for your father and the professor. I will. Under everyone's gaze, the visitors from the other world laid flowers for the two heroes, then Lorna looked resolutely at Jean. Ms. Jean, tell us how we can help. Jean didn't answer, she noticed that not all of the visitors stood with the same resolve. Thank you, Lorna, but I want you to be certain. This isn't your world's fight, are you really sure? Yes. Lorna's reply rang with absolute certainty. During the 3 years you were gone, we realized the sacrifices both the X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants made for our future. Now. Lorna looked at the two names on the stones. It's our turn to stand up. As she finished, Thunderbird, Blink, and the Stepford Cuckoos stood firm, while Eclipse and the Struckers looked hesitant. Lorna, maybe we should think this through. No offense, Ms. Jean, I just believe we need more preparation. Her boyfriend, Max Diaz, spoke up. They had only just become parents, he didn't want them trapped in another world's war against humanity. His words left Lorna stunned and ashamed. No. Max, how can you say that? Look what the humans here have done to mutants. Lorna. Under everyone's gaze, Max flushed with embarrassment. Jean gently came to his rescue. No, Lorna, Max is right. You must be sure, and the truth is, we're not ready either. At her words, many of the funeral goers looked ashamed, some even lowering their heads. Lorna noticed. She stared in disbelief. Even in the Sentinel Services prison where she'd once been held, the mutants had never looked this hopeless, this devoid of light. Now the visitors from the gifted world truly felt the pain of this world's mutants. Why? Lorna couldn't understand, but no one answered, they only hung their heads in shame. Just then a horn blared, drawing every eye. Across the way, another portal opened and a black sedan rolled slowly through. Fear flashed across the mutants' faces. Lorna's group tensed. Only Jean and Kitty understood, their expressions turning complicated. Under everyone's watch, the sedan eased to the edge of the crowd. The door opened and a figure stepped onto the grass. Every mutant widened their eyes and cried out in disbelief. It's him. Impossible. Logan. Wolverine. It's Wolverine. 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 Roaring cheers exploded across the island. Even the mutants who had stayed indoors rushed out at the name. Seeing Logan, they sprinted toward him in jubilation. The visitors from the other world were flushed with excitement. A living Wolverine. God. Logan, have you come to lead us into battle? With Wolverine here, we can't lose. An indescribable force swept away every trace of despair. Everyone crowded together, chanting Logan's name. Hope rekindled in mutant eyes. In that instant, Logan, Wolverine, was unquestionably the only star of this world. Behind the cheering crowd, Carl and Raven stepped from the portal beside Jean and Kitty and said quietly, "See. That's the charisma of Logan, of Wolverine, no one can replace him, he is one of a kind." Amid the cheers and jostling of every mutant, Logan presented flowers to Professor and Magneto, with Laura and Caliban beside him. Yet he never said a word. After quietly attending the funeral, he went straight to the room Carl had arranged for him. He didn't even speak to Jean or Kitty, only glancing at them from afar. "This is your room. Rest here first. Laura and the others will be taken care of by Jean. Oh, there's liquor in the cabinet. Thanks." He shut the door. Looking at the Spartan room, Logan could still hear the cheers echoing in his ears. But they stirred nothing in him. All he wanted now was to quietly wait for death to arrive in 3 days. He was exhausted. He went to the liquor cabinet, pulled out a bottle, glanced around, and sat on the sofa to drink in silence. He had never felt such calm. Charles needed no more worry, Laura was settled, everything was no longer his concern. All he had to do was wait for death. At that moment he noticed something. A sliver of light seeping through the crack of the wardrobe. It looked familiar, yet he couldn't place it. Curious, he rose, walked over, and opened the wardrobe door. Inside lay a black uniform, the metallic X on the belt gleaming. That glint had been the reflection of the X. His body shook. He reached out, fingers brushing the black fabric, eyes lost in memory. It represented the happiest days of his life. Under the professor's guidance he'd joined the X-Men, fought side by side with Scott, Jean, Hank, Aurora, Anna Marie, Peter, against Magneto's Brotherhood and humankind. Now only he, Jean, and Kitty remained. Sunlight streamed through the room, bathing the black uniform in gold. Logan sat opposite it on a single sofa, sipping liquor, eyes flickering, thoughts unreadable. Time trickled past, only his heavy breathing and the clink of the bottle broke the silence. "So this is your X-Men uniform." Led by Jean, the group entered the cavern that housed Cerebro. Under Kitty's guidance, the black X-Men uniforms appeared before everyone. "Yes." Kitty took one from the rack and held it out to Raven. "This belonged to our world's Mystique. I now give her place, and this uniform, to you." Raven ran her fingers over the black fabric, feeling its meaning, and nodded. "Thank you." Next, Kitty produced a uniform with a cape. "Lorna, this originally belonged to your father, Eric. I altered it. I now give it to you, along with this helmet, passed on in Eric's name, hoping you'll carry forward his legacy." "Thank you." Hands trembling, Lorna accepted Magneto's uniform. Kitty offered no others, each carried memories too dear. After the gifts, Lorna turned to Carl and asked hesitantly, "Will Logan really agree?" Everyone looked at Carl. Even the mutants from the gifted world understood this stranger among them held the final say. Carl himself was unsure. "I don't know, but we've done everything we can." Kitty nodded. "So what's your next move?" With only trusted people present, Carl spoke plainly. "My plan is simple. I don't intend all-out war with humanity, but the true culprits behind the fall of this world's mutants, the Akali Institute and Dr. Reese, must pay. By destroying the Institute we'll declare to the world, mutants are still here. But we don't know where the real base is. All the children knew was a decoy. Don't worry." Carl looked at everyone. "Why do you think I let Donald Pierce, leader of the Raiders, live?" Eyes lit up. Kitty finally understood why Jean had described this man from another world as one who foresaw everything. "So what do we do? Storm the gates?" asked Lorna. "We'll storm them, but how is the question. Every mutant life is precious, we need a plan that keeps losses to a minimum." "What are you thinking? Lure the tiger from the mountain." Carl voiced his idea. After that night, the Institute must have spotted this island. Right now satellites are probably watching us non-stop. Kitty caught on at once. "You mean use the island as bait to draw Dr. Reese and most of the raiders here, then hit their base while it's empty?" "Exactly. With their base undefended we can win big with minimal casualties." Eyes sparkled around the room. Carl wasn't finished. "Next we stage a relocation. That'll force their hand. After all, I can't stay in this world much longer." Everyone understood. "What if he doesn't take the bait? Then we go in hard." Deadline. 8 p.m. The day after tomorrow. If nothing moves, we strike. Jean, fully convinced, eyes bright, said. Just tell us what to do. Then I won't stand on ceremony. Carl addressed everyone. Jean, Ms. Lorna, Kitty, Raven, rally every mutant willing to fight. We launch at 8 sharp the day after tomorrow. I'll supply weapons, I'll open a portal straight into the Institute's base. I'll remain here with Dr. Reese. To avoid suspicion, we'll leave the duplicator as well. Kitty nodded. A duplicator was perfect for misdirection. Raven voiced her worry. Carl, you're staying here alone. Relax. Dr. Reese won't leave this island. He gave Raven a confident smile. And who says I'm alone? Isn't Logan still here? Logan. Stunned, everyone turned to the cavern entrance, and froze. There, framed in the opening, stood Logan in the familiar black X-Men uniform, as if 25 years had rolled back to the day he first joined. Carl's guess was right. In the Pacific, on an island wrapped by storms. As the controller here, Dr. Reese monitored everything happening on Genosha Island through the satellite above his head. On the screen in front of him, the images of the island were playing clearly. Including those mutants from nowhere, as well as Wolverine, Logan and X-23 who had also returned here. If Logan were here, he would recognize this island as the one owned by General Stryker, the controller of the Weapon X program. Have you found out the origins of these mutants? On the screen, Stryker rubbed his chin, watching the mutants on the island who were packing up, preparing to leave. Beside him, a black woman shook her head with worry. Sorry, Dr. Reese, we can't find out the origins of these mutants. Dr. Reese narrowed his eyes slightly. Interesting, it seems we've underestimated these mutants. Tell the president and the military that the mutants haven't been eliminated, but are hiding somewhere we don't know, preparing to strike back. Now, with only the Raiders' power, it's not enough. I need warships and soldiers to eliminate all mutants. The black woman nodded and asked a question. When do we act? Dr. Reese didn't answer, but asked. How's Pierce's transformation? Although it can't reach X0 level, it's already very successful, much better than X24. He's awakened and can join the battle directly. What about the 4 Sentinel robots? We've cracked their control system and made some modifications. They can join the battle at any time. Great, I can't think of any reason to waste more time. Tomorrow night at 8, we'll attack this island. I want every mutant on it captured. No problem. The fat woman was about to leave. Suddenly, Dr. Reese looked at the screen at Mystique and Wolverine. Bring X24 too. This time, I'm going to take action personally. Time passed slowly, and soon it was the next day. As night fell, on the vast sea, a warship flying the American flag slowly approached Genosha Island. In the main control room, the officer, General Jason, looked at the small dots on the screen with disbelief. Because it was night, the artificial satellite could only use infrared mode to observe the island. As a result, they could clearly see the number of mutants on the island. Incredible, Dr. Reese, the Department of Defense and the President were shocked when they saw the intelligence you sent. They thought these freaks had been completely eliminated. Dr. Reese looked at General Jason with satisfaction. So, we're here to eliminate these monsters, aren't we? General Jason nodded. Yes, but are all the mutants on this island? From the numbers, yes, including the Wolverine, Phoenix, Kitty Pryde, and the 2 mutants who made the news a few days ago. Mystique. General Jason's eyes lit up. I've heard this code name from my father. May I ask who your father is? Bolivar Trask. Dr. Reese's eyes lit up. No wonder he felt familiar when he first saw this naval general. My father spent half his life in prison because of her, until he died. So, if you catch her, can you hand her over to me? Dr. Reese hesitated for a moment, then agreed. Of course, but before that, I need some of her blood samples. That's great, but is this enough? I've heard from my father that these mutants are extremely ferocious, especially that Wolverine. Dr. Reese appeared very confident. Don't worry, General Jason, that Wolverine has become an old wolf that can't even extend its claws. As for those mutants on the island, Dr. Reese's face showed a confident smile. I doubt they can even use their abilities. Time soon came to 8. Countless Navy SEALs and Raiders members rode on speedboats, under the cover of night, slowly approaching the beach of Genosha Island. Doctor, We've successfully landed. Good. Surround the entire island according to the plan. On the warship's deck, after Dr. Reese gave the order, he looked at the 4 huge boxes sent by forklift. What are these? After knowing the connection between the two, Dr. Reese and General Jason's relationship immediately improved. So, for General Jason's question, Dr. Reese didn't hide, but took out a tablet-like controller, pressed some codes, and the 4 huge boxes immediately shook. Under the gaze of all the Navy on the warship, the boxes were opened, and 4 purple and silver robots appeared in front of everyone. At this moment, General Jason immediately recognized them, full of disbelief. This is the Sentinel robot my father invented. Yes, after the Department of Defense learned about these mutants, they gave me the control permission for these robots. With their powerful firepower, those mutants have nowhere to escape. After speaking, Dr. Reese pressed a button on the screen. The eyes of these 4 robots immediately lit up, then slowly floated, heading towards Genosha Island. They have the ability to detect the X gene of mutants, making them natural mutant killers. General Jason looked at these flying robots, his eyes full of greed. Dr. Reese, after these mutants are eliminated, perhaps we can sit down and have a chat. Of course. Dr. Reese extended his hand. For our father's shared dream, eliminate the mutants. Eliminate the mutants. The 2 hands shook at this moment. Then, Dr. Reese said goodbye and boarded the helicopter already prepared. At the moment the helicopter left, General Jason also saw 2 terrifying figures in the back seat. A monster that looked like a scientific freak, full of stitched scars. A burly man exuding a beastly aura. Looking at this scene, General Jason's gaze became gloomy. This all belongs to my father. Under the dark night, at the entrance of the Cerebro cave. Wearing a black X-Men uniform, Logan, who seemed to have returned to his youth, was drinking wine noisily. Carl stood on the cliff, holding a pair of infrared binoculars, looking at the coastline. Our guests are here. I don't have your healing ability, so you take the main attack, and I'll cover you, how about that? Logan drank the wine in one gulp, threw the bottle on the ground, and stared at the incoming human soldiers. The adamantium steel claws slowly extended, no extra words, just panting. Let's have a big fight. On Genosha Island. In the dense forest, over 100 Raiders mercenaries and 50 Navy SEALs were closing in on the central village from every corner of the island. Go! 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 Before long, their eyes caught sight of the primitive mutant village. They could even see a few mutants bustling about. Without hesitation, they fired illumination flares into the sky. The sky lit up brilliantly in an instant. Go! 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 Hands up! Get down! Quickly, rifles raised, they ringed the entire mutant settlement, only to realize something was off. The tattered robed figures who'd hidden their faces now revealed the same man's visage, grinning viciously, pulling grenade pins and hurling the bombs straight at them. Every human soldier's pupils shrank. It was already too late. Boom! 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 Thunderous blasts rocked the island. Navy SEALs and Raiders alike were thrown into chaos. Rumble. Above, rotor blades thundered. Inside the helicopter, Dr. Reese heard the deafening explosions through his headset. The confidence on his face flickered into stunned disbelief. What's happening? A terror-stricken Raider's voice crackled over the radio. Doctor, it's a trap. What? Before he could react, the channel cut to beast-like roars, gunfire, and screams. Doctor. A bad feeling gripped Dr. Reese, yet he instinctively barked at the pilot. Fly over, find out what's going on. The rotors spun faster as the chopper banked. But as they crested a mountain, the patchwork monster behind Dr. Reese suddenly snapped its eyes open, seized him, and vanished on the spot. Whoosh! Dumped on the ground, Dr. Reese barely registered the blast overhead. Boom! The helicopter he'd just ridden was now a fireball, wailing as it plummeted into the forest. A burning, hulking figure stumbled out, shrieking in agony. The sudden assault left Dr. Reese dazed. He could hardly process it. The mutants were fighting back. After 25 mutation-free years, his life's work, drive. Reese had reduced the remaining mutants to rabbits beneath his hunting rifle. Would rabbits ever resist capture? Of course not, they only fled. And for years, that's exactly what mutants had done. Especially since the Westchester incident, without the X-Men, they could only scurry like insects through the shadows. Yet now they resisted, facing human troops and raiders head-on. Rage flooded him, he roared into the radio. Kill them, leave none alive. His research needed only their corpses anyway. But the radio answered only with howls and sporadic gunfire. Frowning, he tapped the tablet on his forearm. The screen streamed feeds from 4 Sentinel robots now airborne. At the target zone, mutant signals were winking out one by one. What's going on? Another ripping sound, he spun to see a blazing rocket racing toward him. Death loomed, his pupils shrank to pinpoints. The cyber-enhanced Raider Chief, Donald Pierce, flashed in front, adamantium blades extending to cleave the rocket in two. Boom. The blast still scorched him with searing pain. Unease finally crept in. Something's wrong. These mutants really intended to defy him. How dare you? He scanned the dark. No sign of the attacker. Far from the battlefield, he had no idea what was unfolding there. Survival instinct kicked in. Protect me. He rushed to the fallen X-24, injected the blue serum to boost its healing factor amid its guttural roars. Up, X-24, I need you. The charred clone of Wolverine regenerated at visible speed, rising with a furious bellow. Find him. In an instant X-24 locked onto the assailant's scent within the dark woods. Delighted, Dr. Reese slapped its broad shoulder. Good. Now kill him. Roar. X-24 charged like a beast, only to be met by a dull thud. Boom. The clone was hurled back, landing in a heap before Dr. Reese. His stomach was blown open, a gaping, bloody cavity spilling intestines. Dr. Reese recognized an armor-piercing round. This foe was prepared. Remembering the single word, trap, fear finally took hold. He dared not let Pierce leave his side. Only one option remained. He would summon the Sentinel robots. Their mutant gene radar far outmatched X-24's nose. But as his finger hovered over the screen, boom. The familiar sound, neither he nor the augmented Pierce reacted in time. Agony flared in his right arm. He looked down, stunned, then shrieked as unbearable pain tore through him. My hand. I can't feel my hand. Ah. Dr. Reese's right hand had lost every finger, only a bleeding, mangled arm remained. A scholar like Dr. Reese had never suffered such an injury. Cold sweat drenched his forehead, his face flushed crimson, the agony scrambled his nerves and dropped him to his knees. He'd never imagined his mutant hunting expedition would begin like this. How dare these mutants? How dare they harm me? Weren't they afraid humanity would retaliate and leave them no place in this world? Suddenly, a young man's face surfaced in his mind. The male mutant who'd appeared with Mystique. Yes, this battle style matched that male mutant from the news reports exactly. Ever since Dr. Reese saw the report days earlier, he'd realized this male mutant was nothing like the simple-minded ones. He wielded weapons and feared no human reprisal. It sounded absurd, but it was true. To most mutants, their powers were weapons enough, they scorned human arms. Realizing this, Dr. Reese roared at Pierce. Pierce, it's the mutant who maimed you. Find him, kill him. The fully rebuilt Donald Pierce's mind was sluggish, yet Dr. Reese's words ignited buried hatred, his eyes burned scarlet. Boom. Fearsome red energy lanced from his eyes, fanning outward and vaporizing everything in a crimson cone. While the forest burned, Dr. Reese crawled through the pain, tore the tablet off his ruined arm with his teeth, and with his remaining left hand commanded the 4 Sentinel prototypes while radioing the warship at sea. General Jason, I need backup. Mutants have hit us. Repeat, I need backup. Aboard the distant warship. General Jason received the plea but only smiled coldly, as if hearing nothing, and asked. Are the drones deployed? Deployed, sir. The entire island is under surveillance. Excellent. General Jason raised his binoculars toward the island. Film everything for the congressman, show them how terrifying these mutants are. Only then can I reclaim what belongs to my father, instead of leaving it to some self-important fool who doesn't know his place. Yes, sir. Shall we provide support? Support. The general sneered. You have no idea how delighted the DoD brass are to see so many mutants alive, another excuse to hike the defense budget and shift domestic blame. And you want me to kill these golden geese? Do you think my seat is too secure? Repeat, I need backup. Dr. Reese didn't know he'd been abandoned. He slapped the comm, thinking the island's signal was jammed. With a roar of pain, he pulled out a blue vial and revived X-24. X-24 might be a disappointment, but he needed a bodyguard. Just then, thundering engines filled the air. 4 Sentinel prototypes rocketed skyward and landed like titans beside him. Dr. Reese exhaled in relief. The forest around them had been sheared off by Pierce's crimson blast. Burning trunks lit the night with the scent of charred wood, yet Pierce still saw no sign of the male mutant who'd attacked him. Protect me. Dr. Reese ordered the robots at once. Suddenly every sentinel blared an alarm and spun toward one direction. Before Reese could react, a staccato roar of gunfire erupted. Rat-tat-tat. Hyper-velocity bullets screamed straight at him. Fortunately, the sentinels proved monstrously capable, forming an iron wall in front of him. Sparks danced so fiercely Reese dared not peek. He shouted. Pierce, take him out. The rebuilt Pierce obeyed without hesitation. Another searing red beam lanced forth. The gunfire ceased. Seizing the lull, Reese spotted his attacker. The male mutant from the news grinned unsettlingly, a Gatling in hand, before vanishing into a blue portal. Under the dark sky the forest fell silent once more. It was indeed that male mutant. But that was no longer the issue, how to escape was. Luckily, he'd come prepared. Deploy the ultrasonic scream. Dr. Reese had studied a mutant whose sonic scream could disrupt others' powers. Replicating the frequency, he built a mutant power suppressor. After acquiring the 4 prototype Sentinels, he'd loaded the tech into them. At his command, the Sentinels' chest engines blazed red, then ear-splitting shrieks surged outward as shockwaves. Ah! The effect was immediate. Amid the trees a blue barrier flared, revealing the young male mutant Reese despised. The Sentinels swiveled their sonic beams toward him like green recruits. Seeing his assailant pinned, Reese, clutching the stump of his right arm, snarled. Finish him, now. Pierce's vacant eyes burned red, a crimson blast lanced at the seemingly struggling Carl. Yet, facing the incoming laser, Carl showed no panic, only a gleam of triumph. He stretched out one arm. Under a spatial field, azure spatial magic wove into filaments that spiraled along Pierce's red beam at impossible speed, back through his glowing eyes and into an unknown universe. Carl had never imagined that good news would come so suddenly. He'd already resigned himself to the idea that, personally, this trip to the Logan world would end empty-handed. But he never expected that on the very last day Dr. Reese would hand him such a gift. He had actually turned the Raider leader whose life he'd spared, Donald Pierce, into a Weapon X version of Deadpool and even given him Cyclops power. It was completely unexpected, yet it thrilled Carl to no end. Because ever since Carl first touched Havoc and sensed spatial magic within his red impact, he'd already formed a theory. Namely, that the reason Alex's red impact contained traces of spatial magic might be tied to certain settings regarding his brother Cyclops' ability. Back when Carl first watched the X-Men films, Cyclops' power had fascinated him. It was just too cool. What guy hasn't dreamed of firing sleek red lasers from his eyes like Superman? Pew pew pew. So he'd looked up everything he could on Cyclops' power. Besides learning that Scott, Cyclops, and Alex, Havoc, were canonically brothers in both films and comics, he also found out why Scott's eyes could emit red impact. There were 2 main settings. The first, the red energy comes from the surrounding world, solar radiation, photons, cosmic rays, etc., which Cyclops' body absorbs and converts into red laser energy it then releases. A pretty ordinary explanation, nothing special. But the second setting was interesting. Cyclops' eyes are actually linked to a dimensional universe brimming with laser energy. When Cyclops opens his eyes, energy from that dimension channels through them as devastating ruby beams. This makes his energy virtually limitless. Only such a power befits the future leader of Mutantkind. And so Carl conceived an idea. If the second setting were true, it could explain the spatial magic. After all, both involve space. A greedy notion also sprouted in his mind. If Cyclops' power really did originate from the second setting, he might be able to wield it himself. No genetic mutation required. He'd only need to find Cyclops, use spatial magic to lock onto that dimension through the passage in his eyes, then create his own link to channel its laser energy as his power. His version might even be superior. Because he wouldn't be limited to his eyes. With a thought he could open spatial rifts anywhere to fire red beams. For a marksman, the temptation was irresistible. It would be literal infinite ammo. An entire universe of limitless energy. Even if not infinite, the sheer destructive force of Cyclops beams would patch Carl's offensive shortcomings. Defense via spatial magic, offense via laser energy. Only then would his powers be complete. He could cast off reliance on human weapons and stand among the top-tier mutants and super beings. Carl thought he'd have no chance to test the theory anytime soon. In his world, Alex's brother Scott was still a child whose powers hadn't awakened. And in this world Scott had died in the Westchester incident. So when he gave up on the idea, Dr. Reese delivered this gift. Why hesitate now? Of course, no hesitation. Shielding himself with a spatial field, Carl stepped right into Pierce Deadpool's line of fire, and as the enemy fired his optic blast, Carl sent spatial magic streaming into those eyes. In an instant he knew he'd succeeded. His spatial magic had entered a vast universe. Next, see if he could open a gate between the two worlds. Boom. Carl slipped into hyper-sensory state, his eyes blazed blue, the world slowed, and pale spatial magic wrapped him in a cocoon of light. Dr. Reese, watching nearby, was stunned. What is he doing? Lacking intel, he had no clue what was happening. Though he knew mutants, he'd never seen a state like this. Then a crimson point appeared amid the blue glow and, before anyone, even Carl, expected, detonated. Boom. A violent red flash swallowed everything. On another battlefield. Logan, now Beast, wore black X-Men gear and swung adamantium claws, showing no mercy to 100 soldiers. With his healing restored, Navy SEAL and Raider bullets meant nothing. Back at his peak, his reflexes, strength, and speed were unmatched. Like a lone wolf he slaughtered under the night sky. He couldn't remember the last time he'd enjoyed a kill spree. Wherever he passed, limbs flew. Around the mutant village lay corpses and rivers of blood. Then a red flare, bright as fire, lit the horizon. Aboard the naval warship, U.S. sailors watching via drones saw everything. Logan, the bloody star, turned young inexperienced crewman pale. The other scene was boring, until the explosion. General Jason misread it, thinking the crimson blast came from the monster's red impact, and greed flashed in his eyes. Stryker's X-Zero has this much destructive power. No one could answer. What's the status now? A trembling soldier checked a tablet. Half the life signs are gone. Incredible. He's a born killing machine, no wonder Stryker wants him. Recall the drones and tell our men to pull out, these images will satisfy the brass. Yes, sir. General Jason didn't care where the other mutants fled, he was glad they ran. At that moment, a kilometer from Dr. Reese's battlefield, Carl tumbled out of a portal, looking bedraggled. The reason Carl was in such a sorry state was simple. He had underestimated Scott's ability and overlooked the fact that, to obtain Scott's power, locating the dimensional universe wasn't enough, the stability of the bridge connecting the two universes was equally critical. Carl didn't know how Scott's eyes worked. But when he tried to open the portal linking the two universes, even though he deliberately controlled its size, it felt like poking a hole in a balloon full of gas. Immense energy instantly burst through the tiny opening, sending everything out of control. Fortunately, when Carl opened the portal, the front side was facing outward, and the spatial field shielded him from the explosion. Still, it meant he could forget about becoming a wielder of laser energy anytime soon. Fortunately, Carl wasn't in a hurry. He picked himself up and looked toward Dr. Reese, 4 Sentinel robots, X-24, and Pierce Deadpool 1,000 miles away. Since the gift had been delivered, it was time to end this quickly. He still had no intention of fighting them up close. The Sentinel robots in X-24 might not be a problem, but this modified Pierce Deadpool made him wary. He didn't know how strong the experiment was, but those 2 adamantium blades alone were something Carl currently had no counter for. They were simply too sharp. Almost nothing in the Marvel Universe could withstand them. And he still lacked the self-healing ability he'd long coveted. Not that he needed it. Carl reached into the air, a portal opened, and a sniper rifle cloaked in black, lethal light, radiating destructive power, appeared in his hands. Its name was known to all. Barrett M82A1. This was why Carl never believed mutants could defeat humans. Human ingenuity could make up for their lack of superpowers. Leaving aside apocalyptic weapons like nukes, just this type of heavy firearm alone was something few mutants could withstand. Its muzzle velocity exceeded 800 meters per second, more than twice the speed of sound, with a range of 2,500 meters, and it could effortlessly tear a person in half. And it cost only $50,000. What about a mutant? The answer speaks for itself. That was why Carl kept such a low profile. Unless he could one day weaponize Wakanda's vibranium, mutants would have virtually no defense against human firearms, except for those bug-level mutants. It was why many people joked that Wakanda's tech in Marvel was a joke. No matter how good a cold weapon is, it can't compare to human-made firearms. In the forest sliced in half. After being blasted away, Dr. Reese climbed to his feet and looked toward the center of the explosion. Sure enough, the male mutant was gone. Tension surged through Dr. Reese again. The pain of his lost right arm constantly reminded him that the mutant would kill without hesitation. For the first time he felt fear toward a mutant, and he cautiously hid behind a sentinel robot. He didn't even dare let X-24 and Pierce leave his side. Just when he thought his fear had peaked, a gunshot echoed through the hills, one he knew all too well. Bang! Before he could react, he stared in shock as the sentinel robot, 3 times his height, was headshotted, parts and wires sprayed everywhere, and the machine crashed with a metallic wail. The round wasn't an ordinary bullet but an armor-piercing incendiary, far more powerful. Maybe the Sentinels from the Days of Future Past timeline could take the hit, but the decades-old originals definitely couldn't. Their strength lay only in detecting mutants and their heavy firepower. Bang! Another shot. Another Sentinel reduced to scrap. X-24 and the modified Pierce could do nothing, they couldn't locate the shooter. One shot was enough to tell them the mutant was using hit-and-run tactics with his power. Watching 2 Sentinels destroyed while he was powerless, cold sweat poured off Dr. Reese. He realized it was time to run. Pierce, get me out of here. The modified Pierce didn't hesitate, he blinked to Dr. Reese's side, grabbed him, and both vanished. Carl didn't rush the chase. They couldn't escape his grasp. He calmly finished off the remaining 2 Sentinels and X-24 before disappearing himself. Bang! 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 With every shot, the modified Pierce blinked himself and his master Dr. Reese another stretch away. Implanted with the X-0 gene, Pierce had gained teleportation, but Dr. Reese's bioengineering was no match for Stryker's. Pierce couldn't compare to the original Deadpool, or rather, Deadpool was the unique original. His version of Pierce lagged far behind in both self-healing and teleportation, and now they were on an island surrounded by sea. Soon the pair reached the shore. When Dr. Reese tried to radio the Navy warship for extraction, no one answered, an ominous sign. Luckily, Navy SEALs and Raiders speedboats were moored along the beach. But as they prepared to board, beast-like roars and human screams sounded behind them. Dr. Reese spun around in horror to see 3 Navy SEALs fleeing the forest in panic. Before he could ask what was happening, a blood-soaked monster dropped from the night sky, slashed its claws, and the 3 men were diced into pieces. In the moonlight Dr. Reese saw it clearly. The creature, bathed in blood, exhaled like a wild beast. Utter disbelief filled his face. It's you, Logan. Impossible. Weren't you too old? Logan, dripping blood, answered. Too old to extend my claws, is that what you mean? Dr. Reese couldn't comprehend any of it. Everything today had exceeded his expectations and understanding. The pain in his arm finally made him roar. What the hell is going on? Logan calmed himself. Under Pierce's wary gaze he stepped forward and spoke. That's my question for you, what have you done to mutants? Perhaps the pain in his body and today's defeat had driven Dr. Reese a little insane. Gone was his usual air of certainty, he roared in fury. What did I do to the mutants? You already know, from that traitor's mouth. I wiped out every last one of you. HMPH. Logan's rage spiked, his breathing turning heavy. He almost lunged to tear the man apart, but held himself back. Seeing this, Dr. Reese wore a dark smile. I spent half a century using genetic technology to alter food and drink just to keep you mutants under my thumb. I never imagined that at the very end, the prey would turn the tables on me. I won't give you the chance again. No, you've already lost. You'll never get another chance. Lost. I haven't lost. Stung by Logan's words, Dr. Reese stepped forward, clutching his bleeding arm, and shouted. I accomplished what my father, Stryker, and Bolivar never could. I exterminated you mutants. So what if you win this battle? No more mutants will ever appear in this world. Nothing has changed. Victory is still mine. You, Logan, are the very image of mutant fate, slowly aging, waiting for death. Even everything you did today is meaningless, only hastening mutant extinction and making humanity fear you even more. Dr. Reese's voice was low, every sentence dripping with venomous curses. For a moment, Logan actually hesitated. He stared at his blood-soaked steel claws, doubt flickering in his eyes. Was everything truly pointless? Fortunately, footsteps sounded again from the forest behind him. It was Carl, walking slowly out of the woods, hands covered in blood. A familiar pair of steel claws was strapped to his arms, as if he too had become Wolverine. Whoa! Carl slid the two pairs of adamantium claws together, the grating noise sharp, and exclaimed. Really cool. Then, as if no one else were present, he said to Logan. You don't mind that I did some rather inhumane things to your clone, do you? I had no choice, without adamantium I felt way too vulnerable. Now it's all good. Logan, of course, ignored him. Dr. Reese, however, seeing for the first time at close range the mutant who had driven him into such dire straits, demanded in hatred. Who exactly are you? Why is there no record of you anywhere? And those mutants who appeared the day before yesterday, where do you all come from? Carl didn't even spare him a glance, simply asking Logan. Chat time over. If so, I've got work to do. Keep that modified freak busy for me. As he spoke, he wiped his newly acquired weapon. Logan asked, puzzled. You gonna kill him? No. Carl looked at Dr. Reese, a playful glint in his eyes. Instantly, Dr. Reese felt a surge of dread. That'd be too wasteful. Don't you think his brain is worth a fortune? Brain. Logan still didn't catch on, but Dr. Reese understood. His body began to tremble with tension. Yes. I understand better than anyone what the X gene inside us mutants represents. It isn't something current human tech can erase. At best, suppress it, just like your healing factor, Logan. By now Logan had caught up, his eyes lighting up. So we can dig around in his brain, use Gene's telepathic ability. That might give us a way to change the world. And if Gene can't bear to do it, hand him over to me. I'll find Hank, he'll definitely come up with a cure to save the mutants. The self-doubt that had momentarily gripped Logan vanished, resolve blazed in his eyes. Without hesitation he turned to the modified Pierce and said. This guy's mine, I've got experience with him. No problem. Roar. With a sharp snick, the claws sprang out. Logan charged like a wild beast toward the modified Pierce. Carl narrowed his eyes at Dr. Reese. No. Realizing what Carl intended, Dr. Reese panicked and tried to back away. But he had already lost too much blood and the pain made his legs give out. He collapsed. Don't be afraid, Dr. Reese. Carl said, pulling out a tranquilizer gun and giving a gentle smile. You'll sleep right through it. On the storm-wrapped island amid the vast, surging ocean. With Dr. Reese having taken most of the raiders away, the mutants met almost no resistance when they assaulted the base. While Jean, Kitty, and Lorna had to lead the mutants in battle, Raven enjoyed far more freedom. Not that she was here just to watch. She had a critical mission assigned to her alone by Carl. It was the first time Raven had carried out a solo mission, yet she performed flawlessly. Perhaps the trials of this world had made her grow. In under half an hour, Raven found what Carl wanted. Whoosh! As the mechanical door slid open, a massive armory came into view, leaving Raven stunned. At the center stood a huge supersonic Quinjet, flanked by 4 Black Hawk helicopters. Armored vehicles, motorcycles, weapons depots, drone bays, equipment stores, everything was there. While Raven was still gaping, a familiar voice sounded in her ear. Is this the place Carl told you to find? Raven turned to see Jean floating over. In the past she might have panicked, but everything this world had put her through had made her calm. She answered steadily. Yes. Carl said mutants should have the power to protect themselves, not just rely on abilities, but on technology. The Raiders' weapons can quickly make up for our shortcomings. Jean nodded. She was no longer the naive girl Professor had sheltered, but Phoenix, merged with the Dark Phoenix. So how do we split this stuff? Raven remembered Carl's instructions. Most of it is useless to us, so I'll only take a few select items. In exchange, I want the design schematics for the Cerebro on this island and all data on adamantium. Through Raven's mind, Jean already knew of that world's Emma and vibranium. Deal. In that case, let's move fast, there are only 9 hours till dawn. This operation targeting the Akali Institute base was definitely a great harvest for the mutants. Not only did it rekindle the will to resist in the mutants of this world, who had lost their fighting spirit, but they also acquired countless human weapons and equipment that could change their lives and give them the power to resist. It wasn't just the armory, there were also things from the research labs and data rooms. It could be said that the mutants didn't miss anything that could be moved. It took the mutants more than 7 hours, with the help of Clarice and Jean's abilities, to move everything to their island. This brought joyful smiles to the faces of every mutant. When Jean, Kitty, Raven, Lorna, and Clarice returned to the island, they saw Carl in the room, excitedly wiping down the newly acquired weapons in his hands, 2 adamantium katanas, and wrapping their hilts with bandages. Seeing this, Jean simply waved her hand, and the adamantium katanas in Carl's hands floated up. No need for such trouble. Under Jean's control, some metal and wood in the room flew up. After being directly decomposed by Jean's ability, they flew onto the 2 adamantium longswords, creating blue and red hilts and sheaths for them. Wow, what a convenient ability. Carl excitedly and enviously held the 2 reborn adamantium twin blades in his hands, drew them out to test them, and then excitedly took out the adamantium steel claws. Can you modify these too? Jean, of course, did not refuse. Kitty, however, looked at the familiar steel claws and couldn't help but ask hesitantly. Aren't these Logan's? These are identical adamantium steel claws that I cut off from the Logan clone created by Dr. Reese. As for these 2 longswords, they were obtained from another modified human. Without Carl's help, Logan dealt with the modified Pierce, skillfully severing his head. Kitty finally breathed a sigh of relief. Where is Logan now? He's with Laura in front of the professor's grave. He doesn't have much time left, so if you want to say goodbye, you'd better hurry. Kitty said her goodbyes after hearing this. Lorna and Clarice also followed suit. Compared to the unfamiliar Carl, they clearly had more affection for Wolverine. Meanwhile, Jean had already finished modifying the steel claws. It must be said that Jean's telekinetic-like ability was incredibly useful. She transformed the pair of steel claws Carl obtained into gauntlets that could be easily worn on the hands, just like Wolverine extending his steel claws. Thank you. Carl happily took them. You're welcome. Where is Dr. Reese? I captured him. Although I said that life always finds a way, we also have to do something ourselves. I plan to take him to our world and hand him over to Hank. With Hank's wisdom, perhaps he can research something through his brain. Of course, if you want him, I can also give him to you. Jean understood Carl's meaning and shook her head. No need, you did very well. So, when are you leaving? If all goes well, the portal will open at 10 in the morning, and we can go back. But if it doesn't go smoothly, we might have to stay in your world a little longer. I understand. If that happens, perhaps Clarice and I can help you get back. That would be great. We gained a lot this time. Besides those few planes, we moved everything else up the mountain. You can take Raven to pick what you want. As for the Cerebro blueprints, I'll send them over later. Thank you. I should be the one thanking you. Our world owes you a great debt this time. There's no need to say such things. We'll be back again in the future. I hope this world will be different when I come next time. At this point, Jean didn't say anything else. After a grateful glance, she said goodbye. She was going to accompany Logan. Now, only Carl and Raven were left in the room. Although only 10 short days had passed, to Raven, it felt like 10 years. Her eyes had lost some of their girlish innocence, becoming somewhat mature and weary. Seeing this, Carl put down his newly acquired weapons, opened his arms to Raven, and held her in his embrace. Only then could Raven release the weariness in her heart. The two had no other movements, just held each other, comforting one another. After a long while, Raven slowly looked up, her eyes somewhat hazy as she gazed at Carl, who was so close, looking into his eyes, and slowly said, Carl, I think I've really fallen in love with you. Seeing Raven's sudden, direct confession, Carl was somewhat surprised for a moment. Although the two had already been intimate countless times, they had never once spoken of love. Is it the influence of the Phoenix Force? Because Jean had clearly told everyone that the Phoenix Force within the Phoenix fragment would amplify the host's emotions. However, Carl was not a fool. Whether it was at this moment or not was no longer important. He lowered his head and kissed Raven. Then, both their bodies grew hot. This time, though only for a short hour, both were more invested than ever before. Carl could clearly feel Raven's bursting passion, as if she was almost going to devour him whole. Fortunately, Carl was no ordinary person. Until the very end, after they hugged tightly and released their love for each other, Raven, drenched in sweat, lay contentedly on Carl's chest. By now, Carl was certain that Raven was definitely influenced by the Phoenix Force. But he didn't reject it. No man would refuse such fiery passion. Thus, after mutually caressing and lingering for more than 10 minutes, they slowly separated. The love on Raven's face grew even stronger. However, both knew that now was not the time to continue, as the night outside faded, and light began to appear at the end of the sea. Time to leave. After tidying up for a while, the two walked out of the room. The first ray of golden sunlight from the horizon also shone on their faces. And looking out, towards the island's cemetery. In front of Charles and Eric's tombstones. Logan lay tightly in Jean's arms, while Laura held Logan's hand. Seeing this, Carl and Raven both fell silent for a moment. After a long while, Raven slowly spoke, asking, "Aren't we going to say goodbye?" "No, this is their story, not ours." With that, he looked into Raven's eyes, stroked her golden hair, and gently said, "Their story has ended, now our story is about to begin." Raven understood Carl's meaning and tightly grasped Carl's hand, saying as if she thought of something. "I want to say a final goodbye to those children. Of course, let's go." But just then, Carl suddenly felt something, his face full of disbelief, and his steps halted. Raven also noticed the change in Carl's expression and asked somewhat strangely, "What's wrong, Carl?" Carl's eyes widened as he felt the changes in his body, saying with confusion in his eyes, "I don't know, but..." As his voice fell, spatial magic emanated from Carl's hands. My spatial magic suddenly increased. Earth 10,005. Inside the wooden house on St. Helena Island. Since Carl and Raven left for another universe 10 days ago. Emma, Salvador, and Amanda have been guarding this place ever since. Even when resting, the three rotated shifts, ensuring one person remained awake. Fortunately, 10 days have passed, and the anticipated attack from the TVA has not occurred. This allowed everyone to breathe a sigh of relief. Next, they just had to wait and hope that Carl and Raven could return safely. In the morning, the time reached 10:25. All three felt a little nervous. Emma, who held the time controller, was the focus of Salvador and Amanda's gaze. Emma also felt some worry, but as soon as the time arrived, she calmly activated the time controller. Instantly, a golden portal appeared in the room's living area. At this moment, the three watched nervously while holding their weapons, ready for battle. Fortunately, nothing disappointing occurred. The moment the golden portal appeared, a figure also jumped out from within. When Salvador saw the figure she had been longing for, she couldn't help but run over. Carl certainly didn't refuse the beauty entering his embrace. He immediately held Salvador close, and the two embraced and kissed. Emma and Amanda, standing nearby, also let out a long breath of relief. Just then, the figure of a young man appeared in the golden portal, startling the three people present. Before they could figure out what was happening, children walked out of the portal one after another, their eyes filled with curiosity and anticipation as they looked at the house and the three people in front of them. Finally, Raven walked out of the portal, leading the last little girl. Seeing this, Emma immediately understood and said, "It looks like you experienced a lot in that other universe." Carl nodded, and Salvador sensibly stepped away from Carl's embrace. "Let me introduce you. These are the children I brought back from that universe. They are." That's right, these children were the young mutants Carl rescued in the Logan world. After Raven took Carl and said their final goodbyes, telling the children that they actually came from another universe, the children immediately said without hesitation, Can you take us there? We don't want to be separated from you. You said you would take care of us. Compared to Raven's hesitation, Carl was much more decisive. What truly made Carl decide to take the children was the statement made by the leading child, Colossus Mason. As a boy and the oldest among the children, he was arguably the most mature. Mr. Carl, we are not true mutants, we were manufactured clones, and we don't belong here. We want to go with you. Also, Mr. Carl, you saved us, gave us names, and gave us code names, we are the X-Force. What more could Carl say? He certainly could afford to raise 14 children. On the contrary, he really needed helpers right now. He had this idea when he gave them names. These children would allow him to quickly establish a considerable mutant faction. After Carl finished the introductions, he gently patted the children's heads. Let me introduce you. They will be your family, just like Raven and me. This is Emma, codename, White Queen. This is Salvador, codename, Angel. And this is Amanda, codename, Darwin. Especially Emma. Emma, these children are the first batch of students at RX Future Academy. As the principal, you must teach them well. The children greeted the three excitedly. Salvador and Amanda were a little awkward, but Emma quickly adapted to her new role, crouching down to greet the children. The radiant Emma, coupled with her sweet smile, quickly integrated with the children, and she asked curiously, "What exactly did you experience in that universe?" It wasn't just Emma who was interested, Salvador and Amanda were too. Because they were all allies now, Emma couldn't use her telepathic ability to seek answers from Raven. Fortunately, Carl was prepared. As his spatial magic surged, a light blue sphere of magic appeared in the palm of his right hand. When the sphere of magic landed on the ground, the magic dissipated and returned to Carl's body. 5 large boxes appeared, along with a man who had lost his right hand and was unconscious. These 5 large boxes were the spoils of war Carl brought from Jean. The combined weight of these 5 large boxes exceeded 3 tons. 3 hours earlier, it would have been virtually impossible for Carl to lift this. Because his maximum strength was only 1 ton, which was the level of human limits. But just 3 hours ago, the spatial magic within Carl suddenly and inexplicably increased by 5 times, which caused his physical constitution to sharply increase, raising his strength directly to 5 tons. Carl still didn't understand what had happened. Why did the spatial magic, which he had studied for over a decade without understanding, suddenly increase on its own? But he had a guess. This might be related to Logan's death. Because at the exact moment his spatial magic increased, something else happened. Logan died. He just couldn't figure out what the connection was. Logically, this might be heavily related to him being a transmigrator and changing the plot. But the problem was, he hadn't changed any major plot points. Logan still died. He had only changed some details. So, what exactly happened? It seems this answer can only be verified when he travels to the next world. However, the sudden growth of his spatial magic was absolutely the greatest surprise. At least he had touched upon a potential method for increasing spatial magic. And this unconscious man, who had lost his right hand, was Dr. Reese. Seeing Dr. Reese appear, the children of the X-Force let out a burst of screams, but upon seeing him unconscious, their expressions openly radiated anger and hatred. Seeing this, the three, Emma, Salvador, and Amanda, frowned, unsure of what had happened. But they soon found out. Everything you want to know is in his head, Emma. Emma immediately understood Carl's meaning. Thus, using Emma's telepathic ability, Salvador and Amanda saw everything that happened in the Logan world and those scenes of despair. That hopeless mutant world once again made the three of them turn pale. And Carl's words rang out promptly. Emma, just like those TVA agents, I'm handing this guy over to you. Your mission is singular. Extract everything useful from his brain, regardless of whether he lives or dies. Emma's expression was colder than ever at that moment. Don't worry, I will make his brain yield maximum value. Protagonist Ability Summary. Protagonist, Carl Lance. Abilities. 1. Spatial Magic. Description. Unknown light blue energy. Usage methods. A storage space, pseudo, the host can use spatial magic to set spatial coordinates on fixed locations or objects, then open a portal to retrieve items at any time, gaining an ability similar to a storage space. B. Spatial field. The host can use spatial magic to distort the spatial dimensions around their body, constructing a space with controllable size and distance for indirect defense. C. Size manipulation. The host can use spatial magic to distort the size of objects wrapped in spatial magic, but cannot change the mass. D. Super sense mode. The host can enter super sense mode. In this state, the host's 5 senses will be amplified, allowing them to see the microscopic world down to the dust level, and also enabling them to see the world constructed by spatial magic. E. Physical constitution. Spatial magic enhances the host's physical constitution, currently reaching the 5-ton level. 2. Phoenix fragment unusable, a small energy fragment of the Phoenix force left behind after it departed the host, possessing incredible abilities. 3. Cyclops unusable, located the source universe of the Cyclops ability via Pierce's modified body, but cannot be used due to unstable spatial channels. 4. Proficient in firearms and technology. The host possesses superhuman-level shooting skills and proficiency in using technological equipment. 5. Treasures, adamantium double blades and steel claws. Back in his own world, both Carl and Raven felt an ease they had never known. Compared to that hopeless world, the future of the universe they called home, at least for now, smelled sweeter, felt brighter. And so time drifted by. On St. Helena Island. To help the mutant children settle in and to set himself up as their elder and leader, Carl stayed with them, building houses on the island. Everyone else was away. Emma was busy pulling every secret from Dr. Reese's mind while helping Salvador and Amanda. She had to use telepathy to keep the two of them from being spotted by Lassie Eye's confidants. Raven had left St. Helena. Following Carl's instructions, she handled the companies and shares he could show in public, about $150 million. It sounded modest beside later tycoons worth billions, but remember, this was 1962. $1 then bought what 20 would buy decades later. Every day crates of cash arrived on the island. He would not wait for the US government to freeze and seize it. Once Raven finished, Carl could move to the next stage. 5 days passed. A neat 3-story villa stood on the edge of St. Helena. Built right by the shore, the front door opened onto blue sea. The house was even larger than the log cabin Carl lived in. 7 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room, enough for all the children. The children around Carl were ecstatic. They had built their own home. These days on the island were the happiest of their lives. Not just because every plank was cut by their hands, but because beside Carl they tasted a father's love none had ever known. All right, enough cheering, go pick your rooms. When you're done, I'll take you into town for clothes and whatever else you need. The youngest sprinted inside. Only the 3 eldest stayed. They were Ghost Emily, Colossus Mason, and Thorn Olivia. Thank you, Mr. Carl. Mason, the only boy, spoke with solemn gratitude. Carl said nothing, only patted the boy's shoulder like a father. Emily, shy, glanced at Olivia and whispered, "Can we call you Dad?" Clones though they were, they still longed for the parents they had never had. Startled, Carl opened his arms and drew them in, Mason included. In that instant Carl became father to every little mutant. When the children were settled, Carl returned to his cabin. He did not rest, instead he tried to master his spatial magic. After the Logan world, the spatial magic inside him had quintupled, yet beyond greater volume and tougher body it granted no new ability. Now he attempted to harness the laser energy of a pocket dimension. Only after returning to his own world did he discover it. That dimension of searing laser light seemed unlike any other universe. Though home again, he could still feel its location. He was attempting something new. To wield laser energy from another dimension required a stable corridor. His earlier portals were mere holes, no length, no thickness. Now everything changed. A stable corridor needed length and thickness to buffer power from another universe. Length, thickness, angle, curvature. Like rifling inside a gun barrel. It stabilized energy, increased range and accuracy. Yet nearly 10 days passed and still nothing. He could not give his portals length or thickness. His spatial magic, though it could warp reality, lacked solid form and could not affect objects. He could not lift a stone or carve a corridor with it. He could only shrink objects and carry them. 5 crates of gear and shards of the Phoenix were hidden on his person that way. With no progress, he stopped wasting time and drew the twin adamantium blades. Of course he had studied swordplay. Yet a man's energy is finite. He preferred firearms. Nothing compares to the destructive power of a gun. But now everything changed. This was adamantium. Nearly indestructible, razor sharp, able to absorb kinetic energy. With his enhanced body he could not cleave through gods, but he could slice bullets out of the air. Once he lacked confidence in close combat. He would not risk it. His strength, 1 ton, surpassed most humans yet meant nothing among superhumans. Even Captain America, Marvel's 50-50 champion, pressed 2 to 3 tons. The weakest, aside from Black Widow and Hawkeye, barely qualified as super. Others wielded tens or hundreds of tons, villains far more. Only in the X-Men world, where brute strength counted for less, did 1 ton seem impressive. Yet even against Wolverine it fell short. Wolverine could punt an armored truck and with adamantium laced through his bones lift 3 to 4 tons, while Carl lacked any healing factor. But now, after the Logan world, his strength had risen to 5 tons, and with twin adamantium blades and steel claws he could fight. He had to train in close combat. As he drilled on the lawn outside the villa, spatial sense made him stop and open a portal. Emma stepped through with Hank. Hank saw Emma, once an enemy, a woman with the same telepathic gift as Charles, 10 minutes ago at the gate of the ancient castle. Without giving Hank a chance to explain, Emma spoke first. Carl sent me to find you. He wants to see you. Yes, you alone. One moment. Hank went back inside the castle and told Charles. Charles, seated in his wheelchair, looked at Emma with some doubt, but still told Hank to go with her. Both of them trusted Carl. Then, as the portal opened, Hank stared at the scenes before him, utterly stunned. Whether it was the island itself or the children in the nearby house eyeing him curiously, there was no doubt, every one of these kids had to be a mutant. Yet at that instant Hank shot Carl a look full of questions. Come with me, your questions will all be answered shortly. The 3 of them walked into the wooden cabin Carl called home. Have a seat. How is Charles now? Hank sat down a little uneasily, took the coffee Carl offered, and replied. The professor's doing well, he's preparing to open a school for mutants, we're in the planning stage. Across from him, Emma's eyes widened in surprise. Looks like Charles and I share the same idea. The same idea. Hank was startled. Yes, I'm also founding a school for mutants, right here. Its name will be X Future Academy. What do you think? Terrific. Hank said with genuine admiration. Whatever else, Carl's actions proved he was fighting for the future of mutants. Thank you. Emma will be the headmistress. Any interest in teaching? It would be my honor, but I'm afraid I'll be spread too thin. Relax, I'll handle the commute personally. Then there shouldn't be a problem. By the way, is Raven not here? She's tied up. You know how it is, founding a school needs both people and money. I had Raven liquidate some of my assets. Is that so? Hank looked disappointed. At that, Carl turned to the real business. I know you're wondering why I asked Emma to bring you here. Hank said nothing, but his questioning eyes said it all. Let Emma explain. Emma nodded at Hank, activated her power, and spoke. No need to be nervous. In an instant Hank saw everything Emma wanted him to see, scenes from that hopeless world. A little over an hour later, as Carl was training outside, he saw Hank step out of the room trembling, his back soaked. Emma's memory had given him quite a scare. Hank glanced at the children in the 3-story villa watching curiously, then looked at Carl and asked shakily. Was that real? Carl slid his twin blades back into their sheaths and set them on the tree stump that had been cleaved in half. You saw it yourself. After a moment's thought Hank asked. May I tell Charles everything? Of course. Now you understand why I asked you here. Hank, I promised the mutants of that world I'd find a cure. You're the smartest among us. Hank nodded heavily. I'll try, but even if I develop a serum that can purge the gene-suppressing mutants, it can only save the ones still alive. The real problem in that world is that humans have altered all food and drink through genetic means. We can't possibly make every human take our antidote. Carl was fully aware of the dilemma. I know. I don't have an answer yet, we'll have to take it one step at a time. Hank understood how thorny it was. That's all we can do. I'll start the research when I get back. I may need Ms. Emma's assistance. No problem. Emma will be staying in Britain for a while. She'll give you her contact info. Then I'll be off. After seeing Hank off, only Carl and Emma remained outside. At that moment the little mutants who'd been watching the excitement came out. The blonde girl asked expectantly. Dad, when are we going shopping? Dad. The title surprised Emma. Calmly, Carl ruffled the hair of the little elf Ranny and looked at the kids. Go put on your new clothes, they're laid out inside. As soon as you're ready, we'll head out. Yay! The children cheered and ran into the cabin to change. Mason, Emily, Olivia, look after your little brothers and sisters. Got it, Dad. Watching the kids disappear happily into the cabin, Emma finally turned to Carl, eyes glinting. You let them call you Dad. Yes. These children are clones, they've never known a father's love, nor a mother's. If you're willing, you can be their mother too. For the first time, a soft look flashed across the proud queen's face, but she quickly cooled and said, No. I don't know how to be a mother. Seeing that, Carl pulled Emma straight into his arms. Feeling the man's burning gaze, Emma looked slightly startled. This was the first time since he'd claimed ownership of her that he'd been so intimate. I've never learned how to be a father either, but we have to start somewhere, right? Besides. At that, gazing into Emma's captivating eyes and caressing her belly, he said slowly. The day will come, won't it? His direct words made Emma momentarily flustered. What? You don't want to? As a telepath, Emma could control her emotions. She gave a charming smile and replied. I thought you weren't interested in my body. How could that be? You're stunning. But I don't want to force any woman. I want not just their bodies, but their hearts. As he spoke, his hands slipped inside Emma's clothes. Emma's eyes turned sultry, and she teased. Raven and Salvador aren't here, so does this count as sneaking around? At that moment Carl finally felt the White Queen's seductive charm. Unfortunately, the timing wasn't right. He leaned to her ear and whispered. Then let me punish you, my little thieving cat, tonight. One has to admit, the balance of yin and yang truly has its merits. After several nights of tangled passion, all the children could sense the change in Emma. Not only had her aura become warmer, her temperament had turned gentler and more patient. If the children could notice, Raven and Salvador noticed even more. Seeing Emma glowing, the two women knew exactly what had happened, but aware of Carl's roving eye, they could only roll their eyes and pretend ignorance. Carl likewise got straight to business. Raven, how's the stock liquidation going? In just a month Raven had begun to show a big sister poise. She looked utterly captivating. Except for a few sticky ones, your Lance Publishing among them, everything's been cashed out. $113,250,000 all stacked in the warehouse. Among those present, only Emma, who'd seen wealth before, stayed calm. The figure stunned Salvador and Amanda. Any trouble along the way? So far, smooth sailing. Good news. It seems neither the US nor the Soviet government has figured out what to do with mutants yet. We must seize that window. After all, barely a month had passed since the Cuban Missile Crisis exposed mutants to the two superpowers, and for nations locked in the Cold War, mutants were hardly the first priority. Salvador, Amanda, how about you two? Salvador answered. With Emma's help, that Abyssinian police chief and regional military council chair, Hail Ahatime, now knows we exist. We've been under surveillance these past days. Once they're sure, they'll make contact. Carl nodded. Chairman Hail Ahatime is my hand-picked choice. He'll take you seriously because of who you are. He wants to overthrow Lassie I, but the Emperor's prestige is too high. He needs puppets who can get close to Lassie I. Your value ensures he'll help you gain standing in Abyssinia. The two nodded, and Amanda asked. Boss, what should we watch out for? 2 suggestions. First, don't rush. Never underestimate a politician's brain. Once you enter their line of sight, don't flaunt ambition for power. Nail your identity firmly into Abyssinian royalty and expand your influence. Second, this is why I had Emma found X Future Academy. The 5 of us alone can't save every mutant or fight future enemies, let alone control a country. We must cultivate more trustworthy subordinates. Once your status is secure and you can touch power, start schools here. Pick the like-minded, and teach one thing above all, the crimes the European, US, and other colonizers committed against this continent. In the future, that will steer people toward siding with mutants. Salvador and Amanda both nodded. Carl's goal was simple: fan the flames of hatred. Let the people of this land choose between mutants and the West. Beyond that, you two must study. Wisdom and ability are both essential. The children too. Emma, as future headmistress of X Academy, take charge of this. Emma's eyes shone as she nodded. Understood, leave it to me. Finally, Raven. Carl turned to her. I'm handing the entire 100 million to you. Goal: the tech we brought back and the knowledge in Dr. Reese's head mustn't be wasted. Use the money to maximize their value, however you see fit. I only care about results. Raven nodded firmly. I won't waste this trip. Good. Next. Me. Tomorrow morning I leave for the next world. You're all busy, so I'm going alone. Everyone present was startled. Yet they knew that under Carl's arrangements no one could spare the time to accompany him. Raven asked with concern. Have you chosen which universe? Carl shook his head. Still have to test them one by one. The last universe had been an exception. Earth 17315 was simply too unique. That made everyone frown. Don't worry. Before, there might have been danger, but now, unless I land in an extremely hostile universe, I'll be fine. For safety, I'll take the time controller with me. If anything goes wrong, I can jump straight back. Everyone finally nodded. It seemed the best option. Once they might have urged him not to rush, but after witnessing Earth 17,315 and learning the future for mutants was 10,000 times bleaker than imagined, urgency gripped them all. Raven gazed at Carl, eyes full of feeling. Stay safe, we can't lose you. Relax, I treasure my life more than anyone. And Carl's tone was calm and light. I can't bear to let any of you leave me. Night. Tonight it was Salvador who shared Carl's bed. Lately Carl had somewhat neglected this dark beauty, so tonight he gave his all until Salvador surrendered hoarsely and they both collapsed. Perhaps because of her skin color, Carl could feel Salvador's deep-seated inferiority, especially toward him. Carl simply stroked her smooth skin tenderly. After a long while, Salvador, finally returning from her daze, whispered. Hold me tighter, Carl, please. Of course. Carl didn't refuse, he pulled her tight against his chest, and only then did Salvador speak slowly. I told you my stepfather abandoned me when I was 14, but that's not true. Then Carl heard the brutal truth spill from her lips. My stepfather tried to rape me. My power awakened, I killed him and fled that hell. Carl looked at Salvador lying on his chest, head lowered, and gently cupped her cheek. When she lifted her face, he met her eyes. The past can't be changed, but the future is ours to decide. Salvador, my angel, that's why we're here. And look at me, you're my woman, I'll give you everything you deserve. At that moment, though utterly spent, a fresh flame ignited within Salvador. Her eyes turned sultry, and she showed Carl her love with her body once more. Maybe it was because of Salvador's loud cries that night. The next day, Raven and Emma looked at him differently. Amanda was not here, she had left discreetly the night before. At dawn, Carl sent Salvador back to Britain. Inside a villa in the capital of Abyssinia. Then all set off. Without Carl around, leaving St. Helena would be troublesome, so Carl had brought everyone here, including the children. Emma had already found suitable schools for them. Besides travel essentials, weaponry, ammunition, precious metals, food, Carl also packed high-tech gear from the Logan world, drones and comms equipment. Emma produced the time remote controller and handed it to Carl. Over the past days, she had taught him exactly how to use it. Carl simply said, same as last time, you do it. I trust your luck. Emma rolled her eyes charmingly, composed herself, and selected a universe code. Done. Carl took the remote and read the display. Earth 17,373. Visually, the code closely resembled that of the Logan world. Any intel? Emma shook her head. Numerically, though, it should at least resemble Earth 17315, so it ought to be safer. Right. Next, you and Raven take care of yourselves. Don't worry. Emma glanced at Raven. We'll cooperate just fine. Then I'm relieved. With that, Carl hugged them both and gave each a kiss. Raven and Emma looked awkward but offered no resistance. Seemed the days of all sleeping together were near. He cheerfully activated the remote and opened the portal. Of course, cautious as ever, he did not step through directly. First he tossed in his business card, no change. Even though his spatial magic reserves had grown, he could only sense his magic on the far side, yet still could not open the gate. So he tried human technology instead. From his crate he produced a drone and sent it through. If spatial magic could not pierce the barrier, radio waves stood no chance. The drone crossed and immediately went dark. Seeing this, Carl had no choice but to risk himself. At least it wasn't his first time. He channeled spatial magic into the huge crate beside him. Packed with 4 tons of supplies for the new world. The crate shrank to palm size and landed in his hand. Don't miss me too much. With 2 playful blown kisses to their worried faces, he stepped into the golden portal. When Carl opened his eyes again, he stood in dense primeval forest. The drone and business cards he had tossed lay scattered on the ground. The sky was blue, the air moist and pleasant. Looked like a peaceful world. In the past he would have wandered blindly, searching for human traces. Now he simply flicked the remote and launched the drone. Technology truly was marvelous. The drone rose, its Ultra HD camera began transmitting, and on the remote's screen he saw his surroundings clearly. He appeared to be in a vast canyon, forest stretching outward, ringed by mountains. To the upper right lay a sizable lake, below ran a broad highway. Farther off, a quiet, peaceful human town could be seen. Judging by the traffic and tall buildings, this was a modern world. Yet Carl had no intention of heading there, he had spotted something more interesting. At the forest lake interface stood a small factory. Crucially, he saw no sign of human activity inside. Good news, he could hardly haul 4 tons of supplies into town for intelligence. He recalled the drone and walked toward the factory. So far, Carl had made a promising start in this universe. But after only a few steps his expression changed and he halted. On the damp, leaf-strewn ground lay a grisly corpse. Carl did not approach, yet he could clearly see what looked like an ordinary worker, clothes shredded, body mauled as if by beasts, brains gouged out. Judging by decomposition, death had been recent. The corpse still clutched a shotgun. Carl's vigilance spiked. Beast attack. Or something else. He produced twin adamantium blades from his crate. He stepped closer, hoping to find clues on the body. But when he was within 10 meters, his gaze caught the logo on the corpse's tunic and he froze, instinctively stepping back. The red and white umbrella insignia was all too familiar. Impossible, must be mistaken. To be safe, he suited up in hazmat gear before slowly approaching the body, breathing heavily. With a stick he pushed aside the leaves on the corpse's chest. Besides the umbrella logo, 2 lines of text appeared. Joe Donald. Umbrella Wastewater Treatment Plant. Realizing his guess had been right, Carl was stunned. He now knew he had arrived in the Resident Evil universe. The insignia belonged to the infamous Umbrella Corporation. But that's impossible. The TVA policing mutants made sense. Disney had acquired Fox, returning X-Men rights. But he could not recall any link between Resident Evil and Marvel. If forced, maybe the Marvel Zombies universe. But these were not the same zombies. Had Disney also acquired Resident Evil without his knowledge? He pulled out the time remote controller, hoping for answers, but the screen stayed dark no matter how he pressed. Now Carl knew something was definitely wrong. Before he could think further, distant gunfire rang out. Jill, full name, Jill Valentine. Born in 1975. A beautiful woman who is outstanding, independent, sunny, and of excellent character. Soon after reaching adulthood, Jill joined the U.S. Delta Special Forces training, learning a large number of practical combat skills, and received high praise in both demolition and lockpicking. Although she did not officially serve in the Delta Force, her outstanding abilities caught the attention of the Raccoon City Police Department, and she became a proud member of the police force. In 1996, after Raccoon City received generous sponsorship from Umbrella, the mayor launched the Bright 21st Century Raccoon City initiative. The outstanding Jill became a member of the Special Tactics and Rescue Squad, abbreviated as STARS, born from this plan. This is a special squad composed of police, military personnel, and special talents. All members are experts in their respective fields. Their mission is to handle difficult tasks that even the Raccoon City Police Department cannot handle. For example, this time, 3 days ago, Jill's squad received a special mission. That is to resolve the frequent unexplained biological attacks and bizarre killings in the northern suburbs of Raccoon City and the Arklay Mountains. In fact, such incidents have been frequent since May 1998, but it wasn't until 3 days ago, on July 9, that Jill's squad received the notification. The reason is simple. These attacks have affected the daily lives of Raccoon City residents. Especially the Umbrella Wastewater Treatment Plant, which is responsible for treating all the domestic and industrial wastewater produced by Raccoon City. But 3 days ago, the entire plant suddenly lost contact, and the plant stopped operating, filling the city's sewers with sewage and a foul stench. The police officers sent by the Raccoon City Police Department also never returned. So, Jill's squad had to take on the urgent mission to find out what happened at the Umbrella Wastewater Treatment Plant. However, Jill never imagined that this mission would be her and her teammates' final farewell. This 5-person squad composed of scouts, heavy gunners, weapons experts, bomb experts, and a medic. From the moment they entered the forest, they felt something was off. They discovered corpses that had been gnawed by beasts, their deaths extremely gruesome. Upon arriving at the Umbrella Wastewater Treatment Plant and entering, everything they saw made them even more nervous. The entire Umbrella Wastewater Treatment Plant seemed to have been attacked by some terrifying creature, with corpses, blood, and severed limbs everywhere, and the entire plant emitted a foul stench. But this wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that these supposedly dead corpses suddenly came back to life. The scout who went to examine the cause of death was caught off guard and bitten in the neck, blood spurting out like a fountain. Just as Jill's squad managed to rescue their companion from the monster, an even more terrifying scene unfolded. The scout's screams attracted all the monsters in the wastewater treatment plant. Thus, a fierce battle began. Fortunately, Jill's squad members were elites among elites, and after a brief test, they quickly discovered the monsters' weakness, their heads. Under powerful firepower, these monsters were quickly eliminated. But just as Jill's squad finally breathed a sigh of relief, fortunately the battle was over and they could return to report. A sudden attack knocked the surviving heavy gunner and weapons expert to the ground. They were 2 hounds, but their fur had already fallen off, exposing bare red muscles, many parts already festering, dripping with sticky, foul-smelling liquid, their pupils completely white, biting Jill's companions. Jill and the remaining medic immediately opened fire. But it was too late. The heavy gunner and weapons expert had already had their throats torn open, unable to speak, and died. Looking at her dead teammates, Jill couldn't accept it. After so many years together, she had already come to see these teammates as her best friends. But now, before Jill and the medic could even grieve, the sound of footsteps echoed, and 3 monstrous hounds slowly appeared at the doorway, drooling mucus from their mouths, growling at the 2. Jill and the medic immediately tensed up, slowly standing up, picking up their guns, and after aiming, they took the initiative to attack. But just then, a crisp sound rang out. Click. It turned out that after the recent battle, Jill had already run out of bullets. Shit. The medic immediately shouted at Jill beside him. Jill, run. As the absolute squad flower of the entire squad, Jill had received the care of all her teammates. Even at this moment, the medic still let Jill escape first. And he fired the remaining bullets, covering Jill. Jill saw this and knew that now was not the time to be polite, immediately turned and ran, preparing to leave first. But she had only run a few meters when she heard her teammates' screams behind her. Ah! Looking back, she saw the medic had been knocked to the ground by the 3 monstrous hounds. No. No. Brad. But even so, the medic still roared. Run, Jill, run. Jill could only flee in agony toward the exit of the plant, but what Jill didn't notice was that the red light of the surveillance camera in the corner of the plant had been flashing. The mansion, the place where we all know the Resident Evil story began. On the surface, it is a sanatorium established by Umbrella Corporation in the suburbs of Raccoon City, but beneath the mansion is Umbrella Corporation's secret biochemical experimental base, known to us as the Hive. At this moment, in a secret room in the Hive. If Jill were here, she would see that on the screens, everything that happened at the Umbrella Wastewater Treatment Plant was displayed. And on the sofa beside, sat a young white man, his name, Kane, the person in charge of the Raccoon City Hive base. On his right, a virtual child figure composed of countless red rays of light floated there. Jill would never have imagined that the STARS unit she belonged to. From the moment it was created, its true purpose was to serve as lab rats for Umbrella Corporation's biochemical experiments, collecting combat data for these experiments. At this moment, Kane's expression looked very satisfied. These so-called elite among elites of human soldiers, under the zombie dogs they created, looked so weak and helpless, which meant that Umbrella Corporation's plan to create biological weapons was feasible. Red Queen, how is the combat data collection going? Already collected. Very well. With this data, the Nemesis plan can be even more perfect. What about this Ms. Jill? A smile appeared on Kane's face. As beautiful as recorded in the data, in that case, leave her to our Nemesis. But just then, suddenly, all the surveillance screens began to flicker, and then there was no signal at all. This stunned Kane, and he frowned, asking, "What's going on?" The artificial intelligence Red Queen immediately replied. Near the Umbrella wastewater treatment plant, strong electromagnetic interference has been detected. What? Sensing something was wrong, Kane immediately roared. Send a helicopter to check. And at this moment, at the main entrance of the Umbrella wastewater treatment plant, Jill was also nervously looking at the man in full protective gear with a sniper rifle in hand, ready for action. Just as Jill was about to speak in confusion. Boom! A deafening gunshot rang out. The shot wasn't aimed at Jill, yet she still felt the scorching heat of the gunpowder graze her cheek. A split second later a wet pop sounded behind her. She spun around to see a zombie dog, its head blown apart, practically on top of her. The narrow escape let Jill breathe again, but everything she'd lived through today had pushed her to the edge. Her teammates dead, monsters she couldn't even explain. She dropped to one knee and snarled in pure rage. Carl walked up slowly, relief flooding him as he looked at the woman in the short skirt and blue tank top, short brown hair, one of Resident Evil's heroines, Jill Valentine. Because this drop-dead gorgeous Ms. Jill told him, without a word, that he was in the movie universe of Resident Evil, not the games. That was good news. Compared with the games, the film universe was a far safer neighborhood. There were fewer ridiculous virus strains, the bosses weren't as terrifying, and, most important, after all these years Carl remembered the movies far more clearly than any game. But right now, he watched two more zombie dogs slink out of the shadows by the factory gate. He spoke to the bowed head in front of him. Can you still stand? The muffled voice from inside the hazmat suit reached her. Jill, trained Delta operator that she was, locked her emotions down. Questions could wait. Fury at these things gave her strength. Hell yes. Then take this. Carl drew an adamantium blade from his belt and pressed it into her hand. Jill closed her fist around the hilt, glanced at the dogs, then at the pistol on Carl's hip, and growled, "You still have bullets." "I do, but trust me, in here these knives beat that gun. Aim for the head, and remember, this thing is sharp. Inside 10 paces a gun is faster and surer, against normal life. But when your target is fast, heals, and dies only to a perfect headshot, a bullet is a gamble. A blade isn't." Carl slung his rifle, drew his second knife, and leveled the edge at the charging dog. Jill understood in the next heartbeat. The knife was unreal. When she threw every ounce of rage behind the swing and met the leaping skull, it felt like slicing paper. She took the head clean off. Amazement flashed through her. Any Delta grunt knows how tough animal bone is. To carve it this easily meant only one thing. Hell of a knife. Carl finished his own dog with equal ease, then produced a pistol and pumped rounds into both corpses, pulping heads and torsos before turning to her. "We're leaving." "No." Jill snapped out of it, shaking her head and pointing into the plant. "My team's bodies are in there. I won't leave them like this." Carl wasn't having it. He jabbed a finger skyward. Jill looked up to see a small drone hovering overhead. "I get how you feel, but that drone's EMP won't mask us much longer. Umbrella will be coming." "What?" She froze, then followed his arm to the security camera above the gate, its red eye still staring. In that instant comprehension slammed into her. "You're saying Umbrella is behind all this?" Carl didn't answer. "Where's your ride?" Jill thought fast. "Follow me." They jumped into her squad's SUV and tore out. 5 minutes later a black gunship thundered down where they'd stood. Half an hour later, Jill killed the engine at a secluded stretch of the Mendez River that wound through Raccoon City. Dense trees masked them perfectly. Both doors opened. Jill studied the stranger, voice cold. Who are you? Carl answered by raising his pistol and centering it on her. Jill's pupils shrank. He spoke quickly. Relax, no intention to harm, but I need you to do exactly as I say, no questions. Hands up, no sudden moves. She frowned but lifted her arms under the gun's stare. Carl knew protagonists rarely turn, but caution won. He stepped close and inspected every inch of exposed skin. No wonder they call her drop-dead gorgeous. Jill Valentine's body was pure fire. Good, no breaks in the skin. Only then did he lower the rifle. Jill exhaled. She eyed the suit. Planning to live in that hazmat forever. Sorry. Nothing personal, I don't trust you yet. Understanding flashed across her face. Trust, umbrella. The pieces clicked. She pressed. How do I earn it? Carl hesitated. Honestly. Hard, since we're strangers. But for cooperation I'll bend. Ms. Jill. She blinked. You know my name. Of course. I stepped in because it was you. Anyone else, I'd have walked away. Then we already have a foundation, she ventured. You misunderstand. I'm not questioning your integrity. I need to keep you from exposing me and wrecking what comes next. So what do you want? Swear you won't reveal my existence to anyone without my say-so. That's it. Don't knock it. Agree. She weighed it, then nodded. Fine. By God, I swear I won't tell a soul about you unless you allow it. Perfect. Carl peeled off the hazmat hood, revealing a handsome face. I'm on a classified op. No questions beyond this. Carl Lance, and I'm here to save Raccoon City. Thanks for watching.